Hey guys, tonight's story starts in that cursed slice of night when the world isn't asleep, but it isn't awake either. The walls groan, the mice are whispering about your bad decisions, and every single relative you share a bed with has somehow migrated onto your half. The hearth is nothing but a graveyard of ashes, and your only light is a candle stub that looks like it's about to retire. Welcome to the forgotten hour between sleeps, where nothing happens, and somehow everything does. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You open your eyes, not because you're rested, but because someone outside is yelling about a goose. A goose? Singular, as if one bird could justify this much drama before dawn. You stare at the rafters, which creak like they're considering retirement. The air is cold in that way, that seeps into your bones and starts weighing down your thoughts before you've even formed them. It's still dark. Not the thick velvet dark of midnight, but the smudged, reluctant sort that hints something might be coming, though it won't be good. You wonder if it's morning, or just less night. No one knows. Not even the sun, who you're certain has hit snooze again. You shift under the blanket. Scratchy wool, possibly made of regret, and instantly regret it. Someone's elbow jabs your rib, possibly your brother's, possibly your grandmother's. Space is limited, and boundaries are conceptual. You hold your breath and try to decipher whether the body against your leg is human, goat, or the heap of winter laundry. Either way, it smells like feet. The fire is out, naturally. No one fed it after supper, and it's sulking in the hearth like a teenager asked to sweep. You consider getting up to poke it back into life, but that would mean leaving the warmth of the collective body pile and crossing the frozen stretch of floor known locally as the Valley of Bad Decisions. Your toes are already numb and might be permanently lost. You give one a wiggle to confirm its existence. Nothing. You mourn it briefly. The rooster hasn't crowed, and you're not sure he ever will again. He's been moody since Candlemas, and you're starting to suspect he's unionizing. Last week he only crowed after being bribed with barley. Yesterday, he just screamed once and went back to bed. This morning, so far, silence. Somewhere, a dog barks at absolutely nothing, then barks again to confirm it. Another voice joins the goose yeller, higher pitched and definitely insulted. The goose honks in reply, defiant and unrepentant. You hear a splash, then cursing. You roll over slowly, trying not to wake the entire ecosystem on the family bed, and succeed only in shifting someone's knee deeper into your hip. You let out a noise that might have been a whimper or a prayer. This is not a new day. This is the in-between. The sacred stretch of time when the world is neither asleep nor awake. The time where no one should be conscious, but everyone island sort of. The hour where thoughts wander sideways, where dreams half finish, and guilt starts seeping in from things you haven't done yet. This is first waking. It tastes like ash and old porridge, and the breath of the person next to you who apparently feasted on onions in their sleep. You sit up just enough to peek over the edge of the blanket. Shapes shift in the gloom. Your mother is still snoring like a blessed ox. Your youngest sibling, the one who collects beetles and questionable ideas, is curled up with a rag doll missing half its face. You once asked what happened to the other half. He told you fire and betrayal, then refused to elaborate. The baby is drooling quietly on a lump of wool that may or may not be a sock. You choose not to investigate further. The roof creaks again, louder this time, as if trying to get your attention. You stare upward and make a deal with it. Hold out until spring, and you won't tell anyone about the hole in the back corner that drips directly into your uncle's ear when it rains. The roof doesn't respond, but a mouse scurries across the beam, tail twitching like it disapproves of your negotiation tactics. You blink slowly. The candle stub on the stool beside the bed is just that. A stub, and a pathetic one, at that. You light it anyway, with the flint your father leaves tied to the leg of the bed in case of midnight bandits or aggressive pies. The flame sputters, wheezes, and then flickers to life like an old man settling in to gossip. You hold the light up and glance around the room. It looks the same as it always does in this hour, haunted and slightly confused. The walls lean slightly in one direction, like they've given up resisting the wind. The hearth is just ashes and ghost heat. A pot hangs over it, blackened and mysterious, containing either yesterday's soup or something that crawled in during the night to die dramatically. You decide not to check. Outside, the noise continues. The goose chase has escalated into what sounds like a turf war. You hear someone shout, "Unhand me, you feathered demon," followed by a squawk and what might be a splash. You imagine mud. You imagine damp shoes and poor choices and the long, slow sigh of someone realizing they're going to have to explain a bruise and a missing boot. You smile for the first time today, back in the house. Someone turns over and mutters a name you don't recognize. You hope it's a dream. You stand finally, slowly, like someone rising from the grave more out of duty than desire. Your knees crack, your shoulders whine. The floor is exactly as cold as you feared. You shuffle to the window, really more of a hole with ambitions, and peek through the cloth nailed over it. The sky is thick and bruised. The trees are still. The world holds its breath. You don't know why you're awake. Not really. No one does. Not the priest, who says it's a divine pause meant for prayer and quiet contemplation. Not the midwife, who uses the time to mend clothes and mutter about men. Not even the old crone by the well, who insists this is when the dead visit and demand soup. All you know is that you've always woken like this, as did your father and his father, and probably some long-lost ancestor who once stared into the fire and wondered if he was the only one who felt like the night was broken into two pieces and he was stuck in the crack. You shiver, then pull your cloak around your shoulders. It smells like herbs and animal. You grab a crust of something hard enough to question and chew it thoughtfully while your breath fogs in the flickering candlelight. The goose outside lets out one final triumphant honk, and you nod to yourself. Whatever this hour is, whatever name it goes by in the hearts of old women and cold floors, it belongs to you now, and to the goose, apparently, but mostly to you. The hearth is cold. The cottage is colder. Not the kind of chill that nips politely at your toes and leaves again, but the kind that wraps around your spine like a wet eel and settles in. You can see your breath hovering above your mouth like it's trying to escape. The fire gave up sometime in the night, burned down to a sulk, and now the only heat in the room is radiating from the tangled human disaster lumped under the blanket. You shuffle past them, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of elbows, knees, and general snoring hostility. Your father's arm is thrown across your sister's face. Your cousin is somehow upside down. Someone's foot is in the butter crock again. You consider peeing, briefly, sincerely, but the thought of stepping outside into the frost-crusted dark, of unlatching the door with fingers that barely remember circulation, is enough to send you retreating back into the shadows like a guilty raccoon. Besides, the outhouse is behind the shed is behind the goat pen, and the goat is probably awake. He's been waiting. You've seen it in his eyes. Instead, you stare at the wall and pretend not to hear the mice. They're up, of course. Always up, always busy. Scritching and scratching in the thatch, in the corners, behind the sacks of grain, probably discussing you. You imagine one of them sitting upright, arms crossed, judging your entire bloodline. They're louder than they have any right to be. You try to ignore them, but it's hard not to take it personally when a mouse sounds disappointed in your life choices. The blanket you've wrapped around your shoulders is stiff from smoke and use and smells vaguely like stew, sweat, and a life not spent making good decisions. You clutch it tighter and step over the dog, who is not your dog, but just the village dog, who decided this was his home last autumn, and refuses to acknowledge anything to the contrary. He's sprawled by the door like a furry sack of defiance. You try not to trip over his tail. The floorboards creak under your feet with a specific volume of betrayal. One of your siblings groans in their sleep. Another lets out a sigh so dramatic it probably echoed in the next village. You pause, holding your breath. Silence returns, except for the mouse orchestra and the wind knocking politely at the shutters, as if to remind you that yes, it's still horrible outside. You tiptoe toward the hearth, not with any hope of rekindling warmth, but because standing still makes the cold sink deeper into your marrow. The ashes glow faintly. One ember, maybe two, cling to life like stubborn old men refusing to leave the tavern. You prod at them with a stick. They hiss in protest, unimpressed by your effort. You mutter something unholy under your breath and retreat again, defeated by fire and circumstance. This is the hour no one talks about. The hour between sleep and sleep, between dark and not quite dawn, when nothing is required of you except existing, which is already too much. It's the hour of regret, of vague hunger, of bladder negotiation. You don't have to go outside, but you could, but you don't want to, but it might be worse later, but it's terrible now. It's a debate you lose either way. You sit on the edge of the bed, which isn't really a bed so much as a platform of shared suffering and communal body heat. Your little brother murmurs something about fish and kicks your ankle. You consider kicking him back, but remember he bit you last week during a pillow disagreement, and you're not sure your tetanus is current. You sigh instead, deeply, the kind of sigh that could power a small windmill. No one notices. That's fair. You glance toward the window. There's no light yet, only the pale suggestion that maybe, somewhere far away, the sun is tying its sandals. The sky is a smear of gray and indifference. You hate it a little bit, but also you understand. You wouldn't rise either if you didn't have to. Your mother snorts awake briefly, rolls over, and resumes snoring with renewed commitment. The baby whimpers and settles again, drooling audibly onto a shared pillow that smells like hair and secrets. You've memorized every sound in this cottage. The crack of the drying beam, the wheeze of the old stool, the way the wind sometimes moans through the thatch, like a ghost who regrets marrying into this family. Nothing is new, and everything is slightly worse than yesterday. You think about the rooster. Where is he? Why hasn't he screamed yet? Maybe he froze solid. Maybe he finally got tired of being ignored and moved to a monastery. Maybe he's on strike. It wouldn't be the first animal in this village with strong labor opinions. The oxen once staged a sit-in for better hay. It lasted 4 hours and ended with someone bribing them with apples and a fiddle tune. Outside, something thumps. Probably the goat. Possibly the goose. You hope it's not the pig again. She's clever and mean and still hasn't forgiven you for last spring when you accidentally fed her a mitten. You only had one, and your hand never quite recovered. You stand again. Walk to the door. Touch the latch. Consider your life. Step back. Not yet. You'll wait until someone else breaks first. It's the silent agreement every morning. Whoever gives in and goes outside becomes the designated hero and defrosts the water bucket. You are not a hero. You are a reasonable person with a healthy fear of moonlit frost and your own bladder's betrayal. You return to the corner near the hearth, curl into the blanket, and pretend you're a log. A warm, unmoving, inanimate log. You breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and try not to think about the icy grip around your ankles. You try not to think about the goats. You try not to think about anything, really. The mice are still whispering. You hear one sneeze, and in that moment, as you close your eyes and drift into the in-between, somewhere between prayer and insult, between the cold floor and your brother's snoring. You accept the truth. You will not pee. Not yet, but you will complain about it, loudly. Later, you light a candle stub. Not because you need to see. There's nothing worth looking at anyway. But because you feel weird sitting alone in the dark, even if half your family is snoring behind you and the other half is likely awake pretending not to be. The flame sputters, like it resents being summoned at this hour, and casts just enough light to remind you how dusty everything island. You watch it wobble, nervous and small, like it's scared of what it might reveal. You are too. The shadows stretch around the room like they've been waiting for you. They're not threatening, exactly, just nosy. One of them looks like a hunched man with a big nose until it shifts and becomes a ladle. Another one, by the ceiling, twitches every few seconds. You tell yourself it's just the draft. You tell yourself a lot of things during the not quite night. Like how the goose probably didn't bite through the neighbor's boot. Like how the mouse you saw earlier definitely isn't plotting your downfall. Like how you're fine. A cough echoes through the wall, raspy and insistent, the kind of cough that wants attention. It belongs to Widow Midroll, who sleeps alone with 3 cats and one enormous sack of dried leeks that she claims are for winter, but secretly uses as conversational leverage. The cough continues, pauses, and then resumes, as if narrating a story only she understands. You hear one of the cats yowl in protest, followed by a soft thud that could either be a broom or a very determined opinion. Somewhere nearby, a pot crashes to the ground. You freeze. The candle jumps. Silence follows, the kind that spreads out like a blanket and presses against your ears. No one moves. No one investigates. That's the rule. During this part of the night, you let things fall. You let things clatter. You let them live or die on their own terms. If you intervene, you risk waking someone who might make you do something about it. And worse, talk to you. You pull your blanket tighter, feeling suddenly like a child again, half afraid of the dark, half convinced it's more honest than the light. Your mother always said the night has layers. Evening is for meals and songs and bickering over firewood. Midnight is for dreams, for stillness, for husbands muttering about taxes in their sleep. But this time, this in-between slice of dark is different. It's quieter than it should be, more crowded, somehow, like time doesn't know what to do with itself and is just loitering until morning. You remember once, years ago, waking up at this hour to find your grandmother sitting at the table with a piece of bread and a hunk of cheese, staring into the candle like she was expecting it to confess something. She didn't look surprised to see you. She just cut you a slice and said, "Sometimes the soul gets fidgety." You nodded like you understood, even though you were mostly focused on the cheese. Now, years later, you do understand. Maybe not the soul part, but definitely the fidgety. A creak above your head suggests someone in the loft has shifted. Could be your uncle. Could be the rat. You've given up trying to tell them apart by sound. Someone lets out a slow, drawn-out sigh, the kind that says, "I'm awake, but also, don't talk to me." It's answered by the sound of teeth grinding and a soft fart, which you choose to interpret as unrelated. You step carefully across the room and sit on the stool next to the window, though calling it a window is generous. It's a hole in the wall with a bit of waxed cloth nailed over it, but it lets in air and sound and the occasional beetle with no respect for boundaries. You lift the corner and peek out. The sky is still dark, but in a different way than before. Less like ink, more like watered-down wine. The stars are fading, slow and shy. A thin slice of moon lingers, like it forgot something. Down the lane, you can just make out the shape of Griever's chimney. Smoke curls from it. Of course it does. Griever the baker never sleeps, or at least not when people are supposed to. He always wakes early to curse at yeast and scream at the dough like it insulted his mother. You've seen him slap a lump of rye so hard it could have sued. Right now, he's probably elbow deep in flour, humming the same off-key hymn he sings every morning. It's comforting, in a way, knowing someone else is up, even if it's griever. You tear off a corner of your crust from earlier and chew it absently. It's dry, but not unkind. The chewing helps. There's something about bread at this hour. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't mind the silence. You think about slicing some cheese, but the floor creaks in that warning tone that says don't push your luck, and you decide to sit still instead. Behind you, your cousin mumbles something about frogs. You don't look. It's better not to. Everyone dreams strange during this time. You once dreamt you married a fish. Not a mermaid. A fish. It gave a speech at the wedding about duty and algae. You woke up hungry and slightly insulted. The candle burns low. You tilt it slightly to make the wax drip evenly. This is the part of the night no one talks about, but everyone knows. You've heard women whisper about it at the well. Voices low, eyes squinting like they're remembering something they wish they didn't. You've heard old men mutter about it by the ale barrel, claiming they used to use this time to sharpen knives or their wits, depending on the week. Even the priest once mentioned, during a sermon, that sometimes the Lord whispers in the dark. He said it like a warning. You don't hear whispers, just the usual. The thump of restless feet, the sigh of settling walls. A rooster somewhere, prematurely ambitious, lets out a confused croak and then gives up. You wonder what time it is, not because it matters, but because it doesn't. The clock is a church bell. The bell is silent. Time is, for now, suspended. You sit, candle flickering low, bread gone, and feel it all. The hush, the hum, the peculiar warmth of solitude in a room full of people. The shadows are quieter now. The cough has stopped. Even the mice seem thoughtful. You don't know how long you sit like this. Eventually, the dark begins to change again. But for now, this moment is yours. Yours and everyone's. But mostly yours. You're not alone. You never are. The walls may be thin, the roof may leak, and the bed may host more limbs than a battlefield surgeon's tent. But solitude is a luxury you've never known. Even now, in the middle of the second night, the wakeful watch settles over the village like a woolen blanket, scratchy, awkward, and heavier than you'd like. You can feel them, the others, awake, like you, in that quietly stubborn way that refuses to be called insomnia because no one has invented that word yet. They call it restlessness, or the Lord's hour, or the I'll just sit here and stare into the fire until I forget what I was thinking about time. You don't know what it is, exactly, but it's not sleep, and it's not day. It's something else. A pause, a breath, a shared stillness that everyone denies having noticed. Across the village, in the low stone house with smoke that always smells faintly of burned raisins, Griever the baker is poking his coals. You can hear the distant clang of his peel against the side of the oven, followed by a low curse and something that sounds like dough hitting the floor. He's been up since before you lit your candle. Maybe he never went to bed. Maybe he sleeps standing up like a disgruntled horse. Whatever the case, he's already angry at the rye, and the rye is already winning. 2 huts down, the midwife is awake too. Her window glows dimly, flickering orange, the kind of light that says someone is sewing something they don't want anyone else to see. Undergarments, probably. Or a doll. Or a pair of socks shaped like a curse. You've met her. She has that look in her eyes like she's seen the inside of too many people and none of them were impressive. You're sure she sees ghosts. You're also sure she's friends with them. You lean back against the rough timber wall, head tilted just enough to hear the wind snake through the gaps in the thatch. The cold is less harsh now, less aggressive, more like a dog that's too tired to bark, but still wants you to know it disapproves of your choices. Your feet are tucked beneath you, blanket wrapped twice, once for warmth, once for emotional support. The candle's flame trembles as if it too is trying to stay awake. Your father shifts in the bed, lets out a snore that sounds like a philosophical disagreement with gravity, and then settles again. He won't wake unless there's thunder or someone drops the soup pot. Even then, he'll claim he was dreaming of a war where everyone shouted the names of vegetables. Your mother is quieter, though her breathing has the rhythm of someone who's definitely listening even while unconscious. You suspect she has a sixth sense for knowing when someone is about to steal jam or ask a stupid question. And then, of course, there's the blacksmith. Somewhere near the edge of the village, probably curled up under his anvil like a dragon guarding hoarded scrap metal, he's snoring, loudly, steadily, like the world depends on him keeping time with his sinuses. You've heard it before, echoing through the trees on windless nights. Some claim it's the forest spirit. Others say it's just his nose. Either way, it's dependable. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to listen better. The village is alive in its stillness. Footsteps creak on distant floorboards. Someone else has surrendered to the call of their bladder or their conscience. A shutter clicks open, then closed. A child coughs. A kettle hisses. Someone somewhere mutters, "Just one more row," and you imagine the village weaver sitting in the dark, stitching cloth and quiet judgment into every loop. It's strange how comforting it is, knowing everyone else is up too. Not talking, not gathering, just awake, separate, but together. It makes the dark feel less like an absence and more like a companion. A shared understanding that sleep isn't the only way to rest, that sometimes just sitting with your thoughts, unruly, half-baked, and probably about soup, is enough. A dog barks once, then again, in that particular tone that means fox or absolutely nothing. You hear the rustle of hay in the barn, followed by a chicken making a sound like it just remembered it exists. The village breathes, not in harmony, but in chorus. Everyone pretending to sleep, everyone failing. You think about what people do in this hour. Griever bakes, the midwife sews, the priest, you assume, prays, though you once caught him pacing in the cemetery, whispering to a headstone like it owed him money. Children dream and twitch and wake up convinced their foot was a monster. The old woman in the corner house drinks something pungent and talks to her dead husband, who, according to her, never stopped interrupting. You sit, you think, you wonder if it's always been this way. If people in castles and caves and distant cities also find themselves sitting at tables with crusts of bread and candle nubs, wondering why their minds won't shut up. You bet they do. You bet someone in a palace right now is wrapped in 15 layers of imported linen, thinking about goats for no reason. Your thoughts drift. They always do. To chores, to people, to that one time you said something stupid and everyone definitely still remembers. To bread. Mostly bread, if you're honest. You wonder if it's too early to sneak a piece from the larder. You calculate the distance. The floor creaks are a problem. The dog might snitch. Your mother definitely will, even in her sleep. You stay put. The candle leans low, wax pooling like it's trying to escape. You blink slowly, not tired, but also not awake in any meaningful sense. The wall presses cold against your shoulder. The room breathes around you, full of sleeping bodies and wakeful minds. And somewhere, not far, another candle flickers in another window. You're not alone. You never are. You chew a root. It tastes like the floor of the pigpen had opinions and got boiled. The herbalist gave it to you with a smile that felt more like a dare. She said it would calm your humors, soothe your nerves, and usher you gently into the warm embrace of restful slumber. What it's done is coat your tongue in regret and make your teeth feel like they've been scolded. You keep chewing because she also said you have to work through the bitterness, and you believed her, mostly because she has a lot of jars and once threatened a tax collector with nettle tea. You glance at the pouch she gave you. It's labeled Peaceful Night in handwriting that looks like it was done mid-seizure. You're fairly sure that the main ingredient is dried disappointment. You tried the tea last week. It made your ears itch, and your dreams involve shouting sheep. You tried the lavender sachet too, stuffed it under your pillow like she said. But the goat got into the bed while you were outside relieving your humors, and now the goat smells wonderful, and you don't. So now it's the incense. A thin curl of smoke winds toward the ceiling beam, searching for meaning. It smells like damp hay and someone trying to cover up an argument with potpourri. You breathe it in like it might help, like the herbalist promised, like the fourth time might be the charm. But it's hard to feel mystical when your nose hairs are staging a protest. The smoke creeps into your shirt and settles there like it's trying to start a conversation with your armpits. You try to relax. You do. You lie back, arms crossed over your chest like you've just been respectfully embalmed, and stare at the dark shape of the rafters. A mouse scurries along one beam, pauses dramatically, then vanishes. You wonder if it's the same one from last week, the one that made eye contact and then stole your crumb like it was making a point. You're not convinced the herbalist didn't send it. Your grandmother insists this is a sacred hour. She says it with her eyes closed and her hands wrapped around a mug of something that smells like mushrooms and defiance. She calls it the space between breath and waking, when the soul can stretch. You call it the time when my foot falls asleep and my thoughts are just squirrels. She says to meditate. You say you did, and what actually happened was you fell sideways into a bucket, and no one helped for 3 minutes, because they thought it was part of the process. You roll onto your side and pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders. It's scratchy and smells faintly of cabbage, but it's yours. You try to think calming thoughts. A meadow, a warm breeze, a chicken that respects boundaries. But your brain is already off, running down side paths and asking questions like, did I forget to secure the latch on the pen? And what if soup had legs? You close your eyes and try counting sheep, but the sheep in your head are too clever. They keep unionizing and asking for better hay. One of them is smoking a pipe and judging your posture. The incense sputters and goes out with a hiss, as if even it has lost patience with you. You watch the last tendril of smoke rise, twist, and vanish into the thatch. You consider lighting another, but the last one made your sister sneeze herself awake, and she threw her boot across the room in retaliation. It hit your cousin. He hasn't spoken to anyone since, which some call peaceful and others call ominous. You chew another root, just to prove a point. It still tastes like betrayal and wood shavings, but now your jaw is numb, and your stomach is beginning to suspect you've made a mistake. The herbalist says to give it time. She also once said nettles could cure heartbreak, but all it did was give you a rash in places best left unspoken. You remember when she came to the village. She wore a cloak made of patchwork moss and had a bag full of dried things that crinkled when she moved. Everyone said she was a gift. You suspect she's more of a long-term experiment. She talks to bees, not in a metaphorical way. You've seen her whisper to them like they're old friends, and once, one whispered back. You don't know what it said, but she nodded like it had made an excellent point about the moon. A floorboard creaks as someone rolls over. You freeze, waiting to see if anyone wakes. No one does. The room settles again into the hush of shared discomfort. The candle flickers, then steadies. You consider trying one of the other remedies the herbalist left. Some kind of ointment you're supposed to rub on your temples, made from fermented elderberry and crushed beetle wings. You opened it once. It smelled like boiled socks and regret. You'll pass. Your stomach growls. Loudly. You're not even hungry. But apparently, your internal organs have decided this is the right time to remind you that you once denied them a third helping of stew. You wonder if the herbalist has a tea for guilt, or indigestion, or both. You sigh, long and slow, and it steams into the air like the beginning of a folk song about disappointment. You are not asleep. You are not restful. You are awake and full of root and confusion. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling through the eaves like it's looking for something it dropped. The goat bleats once, probably still wearing the lavender sachet like a fashion statement, probably sleeping better than you. You shift again, trying to find a position that doesn't involve one of your joints crying. Your neck pops. Your shoulder makes a sound that can only be described as medieval. The incense smell is still clinging to your hair like a bad decision. You close your eyes one more time, telling yourself you'll drift off soon. And maybe you will, right after you finish this route. Your uncle kneels in the corner like he's proposing to the wall. The floor creaks beneath his knees, a sound both tragic and suspiciously crunchy. But he doesn't flinch. His hands are clasped, his eyes are shut tight, and he is praying with the intensity of someone who believes heaven is a bit hard of hearing. He starts with forgiveness, always, then detours into health, then gets specific. Last night it was his knees. Tonight it's probably his neighbor's goat. Or the mole on his back that he's decided might be prophetic. You've learned not to ask. You've also learned that he doesn't care if you do. Across the room, your sister whispers to herself while drawing on the floor with a charcoal stub. It's from the fire, still warm. She traces looping symbols and writes half-remembered dreams in the soot, like she's negotiating with something under the bed. She does this a lot during the second waking. No one stops her. No one wants to find out what happens if you interrupt mid-sigil. One time, she drew a circle around your cousin, and he couldn't speak for 2 hours. He says it was a coincidence. You're not convinced. Someone outside is reciting a psalm. You can't tell who at Island. Just a low, rhythmic chanting that seeps through the wall like steam. It's the kind of voice that has given up on sleep and decided to bargain with eternity instead. The cadence is slow, familiar. Line, pause, exhale. It could be the priest, or the miller's wife, who once claimed she saw an angel in the flower. It turned out to be the cat, covered in ash. But still, your mother sits on her stool by the hearth, not speaking, not moving, just watching the dying embers. She's wrapped in 3 shawls and holding her mug like it's got all the answers. She doesn't pray out loud. She says God hears better when you don't shout. She also says God prefers honesty over poetry. So she just stares at the fire like it owes her rent, and occasionally mutters something that might be a request or might be a complaint. Same thing, really. The bread dough on the table has not risen. It slumps in the bowl like it's been personally insulted. Your older brother leans over it, muttering what might be encouragement or threats. "Come on," he says, voice low. "Just a little lift. Don't make me get the vinegar again." You've seen him argue with dough before. He always loses, but never admits it. The bread ends up heavy enough to be used in self-defense. But at least it's warm. Everyone has their ritual. You sit by the window, forehead pressed to the cold wood, watching frost collect like thoughts. You don't pray, not the way they do. You don't speak psalms or chant or beg the heavens to reroute your destiny. You just breathe, slow, steady. You think if God listens to anything, it's probably silence or heavy sighs. You've tried talking out loud before. Once, when your best hen died, you sat behind the barn and told the clouds you'd trade your shoes to get her back. Nothing happened. You went inside barefoot. Your mother asked if you were daft. Your uncle said your hen probably committed some unholy crime. The clouds said nothing. Sometimes, in this hour, you try again. Not the asking part. Not anymore. Just the talking. You tell the dark what you're worried about, what you remember, what you wish you didn't. The dark doesn't answer, but it doesn't interrupt either, which is more than you can say for your family. Tonight, your thoughts are crowded. You try to let them line up like obedient sheep, but they insist on behaving like geese in a thunderstorm. You think about the harvest, about the aching in your hip that wasn't there last winter, about the strange light in the woods no one talks about but everyone avoids. You think about how the walls of your home are made of mud and prayer and how both crack when it gets cold. You think about death. You think about life. You think about bread, and still, the house breathes around you. Your uncle's voice rises, cracking on a particularly desperate syllable. He doesn't stop. He never does. He says this is when God listens best, during the between time. When the world is quiet and the mind is too tired to lie. You wonder if that's true. You wonder if God actually prefers the moments no one else does. The awkward ones. The lonely ones. The ones where nothing is happening except a floorboard shifting and a mouse chewing something it shouldn't. Your sister finishes her soot spell and blows on it softly, like dandelion fluff. The cymbals smear. She nods, satisfied. She's probably hexed the entire street, or summoned a toad. Either way, she curls back under the blanket like she just finished a night shift at the monastery. You decide not to step in that spot tomorrow. Your father wakes just enough to clear his throat and roll over. He opens one eye, sees your uncle still kneeling, and lets out a sound that might be a groan or a prayer, depending on your interpretation. Then he's asleep again, mouth open, dreams leaking out. You run your fingers along the windowsill. The wood is splintered but familiar. You trace the same groove you always do, the one someone carved 100 years ago. A name maybe, or a curse, or just boredom. You wonder if they were awake, like you, staring into the dark, talking to God or the floor, or nothing at all. You wonder if they got answers. The candle sputters once, flares, then settles. You don't need it anymore. The room has adjusted to the dark. Or maybe the dark has adjusted to you. Either way, you sit, listening to the quiet rhythms of a house half asleep and half praying, half remembering and half hoping, and you whisper to no one in particular, because someone might be listening, or no one island, but you say it anyway, just in case. You build a new fire because the old one died like a martyr. Dramatic, smoky, and way too early. The ashes glare up at you with the quiet resentment of a task half finished. You prod them with the iron poker, hoping they'll spark themselves out of guilt. But no, they are stubborn, ashy corpses. So you start over. You pile kindling like a humble offering and strike flint like you're trying to insult it into cooperation. The spark lands. The spark dies. You mumble something profane and pretend it was a prayer. When the flame finally catches, it does so with a hiss, like it resents you personally. Smoke curls straight into your face as though it has opinions about your life choices. You lean back, eyes watering, and blink into the haze like someone trying to read tea leaves in a sandstorm. The fire sputters, threatens collapse. Then, miracle, it flickers upright, just enough to look smug. You add a log like a bribe, coaxing it to stay, whispering the same nonsense people use on babies and bread dough. It accepts, barely. This is the second fire, the one that doesn't burn for light or for cooking, but for the quiet theater of not being alone in the dark. It gives off just enough heat to keep your toes attached, and just enough glow to prove that time is still passing. You watch it like it's a play. Nothing happens. That's the point. Behind you, the blanket pile shifts. A sigh, a snort, the rustle of someone re-entering consciousness unwillingly. Your sibling rises, eyes half open, hair standing in directions unapproved by any god. They look at you like they've caught you committing a crime. Is it tomorrow? They ask, voice thick with sleep and judgment. You shrug. They nod, satisfied with the ambiguity, then punch you in the leg and go back to sleep without further explanation. You rub your shin. Peaceful, you think, with the deadpan sarcasm of someone who hasn't had a full night's rest since they were 5. The fire crackles louder now, emboldened by its survival. It spits a spark that lands near your foot, and you stare at it until it dies, because that's how problems are handled in this house. You poke the log again, not because it needs it, but because it makes you feel like you're participating in the ancient tradition of fire tending, instead of just waiting for sleep to ambush you again. You think about second sleep, how no one talks about it like it's real, but everyone does it. The in-between sleep, the one that comes after the fire's been fed, the dreams have been processed, and the thoughts have had their tantrums. It's not a luxury. It's a ritual. First sleep is what you collapse into. Second sleep is what you choose. Your uncle once said, second sleep is when the world is closest to truth. You're pretty sure he was drunk, but still, he has a point. There's something honest about this hour. No one's pretending to be busy. No one's performing competence. It's just you, the fire, and the echoes of a day that isn't quite done being resented. The room settles again, people breathing in various keys, snoring in different rhythms. You try not to count them, but you do. 6 humans, 2 cats, 1 dog that technically belongs to the neighbor but prefers your hearth. Everyone accounted for. No one fully awake, no one fully asleep, just floating. You sit closer to the flames, letting the heat bite at your fingers until it hurts in a good way. You think about whether it's worth crawling back into the bed. It will be warm, yes, but also full of elbows and knees, and one person who sleep talks in riddles. The blanket's been pulled entirely off your corner anyway. You consider reclaiming it, but that would require negotiations. And there's always the risk of waking the snorer, who snores louder in retaliation if disturbed. Instead, you stare at the fire, letting your thoughts unspool like a dropped ball of yarn. They tangle, they loop. You find yourself thinking about soup again, about the way the chicken looked at you before it became soup, about whether chickens have opinions on reincarnation, about whether second sleep is a kind of reincarnation, just shorter, and with less paperwork. You think about the word tomorrow, and how slippery it feels right now. This doesn't feel like tomorrow. This feels like the intermission between scenes of a play that's both too long and too familiar. You know your lines. You don't like them, but you'll still say them when the rooster decides you've been horizontal long enough. The dog twitches in its sleep, chasing something invisible and very important. A cat sneezes. Your grandmother mumbles from her blanket cocoon. It sounds like turnip, but that could mean anything. You decide not to investigate. The fire is safer. A gust of wind howls through the chinks in the door. The flame leans sideways, recovers. You wrap the blanket tighter around your shoulders, even though it doesn't help. It's the illusion of control that matters. You could be cold with dignity or cold without it, and you're choosing the former. Your eyes grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from agreement. Your body has decided it's time. The second fire has done its job. It's told your bones to soften, your mind to quiet, your heart to stop narrating everything like it's a bard with performance anxiety. You stretch, crack a few joints that weren't supposed to make that noise, and rise. You don't extinguish the fire. You feed it one last scrap of wood and trust it to behave. You crawl back into the shared bed like a spy sneaking into enemy territory. There's a toe where your pillow should be. There's a snore in your ear. There's warmth, though. Real, shared warmth. You pull the blanket over your head and breathe in the scent of sleep and too many people in one room. Tomorrow will come. It always does. But for now, there's second sleep. And you're ready. The walls are thin. Not metaphorically. Literally. You can hear the chickens breathing on the other side, and they are not quiet breathers. Somewhere in the next cottage over, there is giggling, soft and repetitive, like someone trying not to be caught enjoying themselves. A high-pitched squeal follows, muffled quickly. Then silence. Then more giggling. Then what sounds like a bucket being kicked over. It's not your business, but unfortunately, it is your soundtrack. Inside your own cottage, the mood is different. The opposite of giggling. If anything, it's closer to digestive negotiation. Someone shifts under the blankets. Someone else sighs, long and burdened. A loud, unapologetic fart echoes from the blanket depths, followed by a small whimper and an audible "not again." No one claims responsibility. You all know who it was. Still, this is the hour. The one whispered about, then denied. It doesn't get a name, but it gets results. Babies are born 9 months later. Whole family trees sprout from this precise window of darkness. It's romantic in the way damp cellars and shared bedrolls are romantic, which is to say, not very, but consistently, and consistently is really all anyone's asking for these days. You lie very still, hyper-aware of your limbs, because any movement could be misinterpreted as an invitation, or worse, encouragement. Your elbow is pressed into someone's ribcage. A knee juts uncomfortably near your spine. You think it might belong to your cousin, who has been snoring for the past hour and occasionally murmuring what sounds like tax calculations. There is no privacy. There are no walls. There is only wool, breath, and heat. The emotional kind, not the helpful kind. Somewhere to your left, your uncle coughs and then says, "It's the hour of temptation," as if announcing a sermon. No one responds. This is his way of gauging interest. It has not worked yet. You hear the rustle of fabric, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone giving up and going to sleep angry. Romance, in this house, is a team sport no one signed up for. You close your eyes and try not to think of anything suggestive, which immediately results in thinking of everything suggestive. You recall a brief glimpse of ankle earlier that day when the baker's daughter bent to pick up a dropped onion. It had been shocking, almost violent in its allure. You try to remember her face, but all that returns is the onion. It was a good onion. There's a different kind of silence now. Not the absence of sound, but the careful, waiting hush that descends when people are pretending not to listen. The air is thick with unspoken possibilities and a faint scent of boiled turnip. You hear a rustle from the far side of the room, a whisper, then a second voice saying, "Shh," with the urgency of a person not ready to explain themselves in front of relatives. The straw shifts, then it stops. You hear nothing more, but everyone knows better than to be fooled by that. You wonder if you'll ever be bold enough to risk it. Risk the sighs, the whispers, the awkward logistics of navigating shared bedding with 6 other people pretending to be asleep. Risk the goat, who once inserted herself in the middle of such proceedings and ruined a courtship. She still stares at you sometimes, judging. Still, the villagers insist this hour is sacred, or cursed. It depends on who you ask and how long it's been since their last successful romantic endeavor. The herbalist sells potions specifically for this window of time. One promises to ignite passion. Another promises to prevent consequences. Most just taste like regret and licorice. But she sells out every week. Your grandmother claims this hour was created by God to test restraint. Your uncle claims it was created for entirely the opposite reason. Your aunt pretends not to hear either of them, and just adds another log to the fire whenever things get tense. You once asked your father about it. He said nothing, just looked at your mother with the expression of a man who knows exactly what happened last spring and regrets the timing. Then he walked outside and stared at the moon for a suspiciously long time. You did not ask again. Someone sighs deeply. It might be you. It might be your sister, who often sighs in her sleep like she's disappointed by dreams. The air shifts. The fire crackles. You try to roll over without brushing against anyone, which is physically impossible. Your leg makes contact with something warm and unidentifiable. You freeze. A soft grunt tells you it was the dog. You both agree to forget this ever happened. In the next cottage, there's another giggle. Higher this time. Then, quiet. You imagine their firelight, their shared blanket, their ability to speak without whispering. You imagine a room where 2 people can look at each other without 12 witnesses and a goat. It seems like a luxury, or a lie. Your sibling moves again, then mumbles, "Don't be weird," into the darkness. It's unclear who they're talking to, possibly themselves, possibly you. possibly the fire. You take the advice to heart. You wrap the blanket tighter and try to return to the safe haven of second sleep. Your body is tired. Your thoughts are less so. They want to linger in dangerous places. The warmth of a hand, the smell of bread and soap, the way someone looked at you that one time in the market, it could have meant something. It might have meant everything. It probably meant they were looking at the goat behind you. Still, you let yourself feel it. The softness of the hour, the small, unspoken hope that maybe, eventually, you'll get your own blanket, your own fire, a room with a door that closes, a night where the only witnesses are the stars, and maybe, if you're lucky, someone who snores on purpose just to make you laugh. But for now, there's this, a crowded bed, a sputtering fire, and the knowledge that while nothing is happening in your corner of the world, somewhere close, something island, and statistically speaking, it's probably romantic. You've never been a writer, but the night insists you become one. The fire is low and muttering to itself in crackles, and everyone else is either breathing dramatically in their sleep or pretending to be dead to avoid chores. You sit cross-legged near the embers, balancing a lump of charcoal between two fingers like it's a quill, though it stains your hands and smells faintly of last week's stew. There's no parchment. There's never parchment. There is, however, the back of a tax receipt from 3 harvests ago. The ink has already faded into a polite suggestion of letters. You flatten it on your knee, careful not to disturb the sock lying beside it. Wool, damp, mysterious in origin. You suspect it has always been here, watching. You write slowly, mostly because the charcoal keeps snapping, and your handwriting resembles the panicked scratches of a bird attempting calligraphy during an earthquake. The first line is ambitious. To my future self. It feels important, grave, like you're reaching through time to say something wiser than you are now. Then you immediately undercut yourself by following it with, don't forget to feed the pig. You pause. Consider. Add. She looks at you with judgment. You nod. This feels accurate. Pig eyes are portals to your worst decisions. Someone behind you rolls over with the grace of a collapsing barn. A foot thuds against the floor. You freeze, pretending that you're not committing an act of quiet rebellion with your soot-covered note. The foot retreats. A snore resumes. You exhale. The sock watches. You aren't sure who left it here. It's grayish, possibly brown in origin, with a hole at the toe that yawns like it has secrets. You nudge it with your finger. It doesn't move. You're not convinced it's not alive. Maybe it belongs to your sister. Maybe it's yours. Maybe it appeared during the last thunderstorm as a warning. The ink from the tax receipt starts to bleed through the new writing, creating an accidental poem that reads, 4 chickens owed per unit goat. You decide this is profound. You consider submitting it to the village poet, but he still hasn't forgiven you for rhyming ale with snail last solstice. You stare at your message again. It's not enough. You add, also, don't trust the baker. His bread is soft, but his soul is crusty. The charcoal smudges. You lick your finger and try to fix it, only to smear the entire corner into oblivion. You sigh. The pig will eat this anyway, probably with enthusiasm. She has no respect for literature. You wonder briefly what your future self would write back. Probably something like, too late. The pig has learned to open doors. Or, the sock is still watching. You imagine an older version of you, wiser but still exhausted, flipping this crumpled receipt over and groaning into a pillow made of straw and unmet expectations. You start a second note. This one begins, stop eating turnips raw. You are not a goat. Then you scratch it out and write, actually, become a goat. They seem happy. You leave that one ambiguous. You hear your grandmother shift in her sleep. She mutters something that sounds like, the geese know, and then nothing more. You do not question this. You do not want to know what the geese know. You reach for the sock. You don't know why. Maybe it's the hour. Maybe it's boredom. Maybe it's the way it just lies there, smug and lumpy, defying the laws of organized belongings. You pick it up. It's damp. That was a mistake. You drop it again. It lands silently, accusingly, like you've disappointed it. You turn your attention back to the paper. There's not much space left. You write, "If you marry the tanner's daughter, insist on separate blankets." Then below that, "If you don't marry anyone, invest in more socks." The current ones are planning a coup. The ink from the front side, some forgotten complaint about grain storage, has now seeped entirely through. The words layer over each other until they resemble a spell or a warning. You like that? Maybe it will scare off the pig. A thought strikes you. You add one last note at the bottom. Hide this from everyone, especially the dog. He remembers things. You fold the receipt in half and tuck it under a loose stone near the hearth. This is your filing system. You have exactly 3 things stored there. A message for future you, half a button, and a very small drawing of a goat that your cousin insists is a map. You lean back, satisfied in the way only someone who has done nothing productive can be. You've left a mark. You've communicated. You've documented your existence in soot and sarcasm. The historians will thank you, or they won't. It's hard to know what the future values. Maybe they'll find your note and interpret it as a religious text. Maybe pigs will be in charge by then. You yawn, the kind that takes your whole face with it. Your legs are numb. Your spine clicks ominously as you stretch. The fire gives a last valiant pop, then sulks into quiet coals. You brush your hands off on your tunic, then wipe your tunic on the sock, because why not? It deserves it. You crawl back toward the blanket pile, careful not to disturb the strategic ecosystem of limbs and snores. You slide into your corner, curl up, and whisper to yourself, "Don't forget the pig." The sock remains by the fire, damp and ominous. Tomorrow's problem. The dream begins, as many do, with turnips. They are very large, suspiciously symmetrical, and growing in perfect rows beneath a violet sky that smells like beeswax and regret. You do not question this. You simply walk the rows, bare feet crunching on dirt that whispers your name in a tone you find both flirty and accusatory. The turnips begin to hum. Gregorian chant, you think, in Latin. Naturally, one of them turns to face you. It does not have a face, but it somehow still manages to look disappointed in your life choices. You wake up sweating, mouth dry, heart galloping like it stole something. The room is dark and full of the sounds of unconscious discontent. Someone mutters. Someone else kicks a wall. The fire has sulked into embers. You stare at the ceiling and try to remember if you've done anything recently to offend the turnip god. Nothing obvious comes to mind, but then again, it's been a long week. Your neighbor, the one with the one good eye and suspiciously accurate weather predictions, insists that this hour, this peculiar slice of night, is when the veil between worlds is thinnest. She says this as though she's seen the veil herself, touched it, folded it neatly, and put it in her drawer next to the dried frog legs and emergency onions. She once told you her dead aunt visits her to complain about the roof tiles and suggest soup recipes. You nodded, because disagreeing with her results in very pointed stares and unsolicited herbal remedies. Your cousin claims he saw a dog entirely made of flame walk across the field last month. It didn't bark. It just stared at him, sneezed fire, and vanished into the woods. He swears he hasn't touched mead since. He is lying. You've seen him share a jug with the blacksmith while debating the proper spelling of churn. You, on the other hand, get vegetable opera, and you're starting to suspect it's because you're not haunted by ghosts. You're haunted by responsibilities. Still, the stories stick. Everyone has one. Your grandmother says the house creaks differently now, like it's remembering things. Your youngest sibling swears she saw a glowing woman in the corner who told her to be kinder to the chickens. The chickens remain unimpressed. Even the pig, who fears nothing and respects less, sometimes stares into the dark with a look that says, "I hear things. I just choose violence instead." You lie still and listen. The kind of listening that goes beyond ears. You listen with skin, with ribs, with the spaces between thoughts. The wind taps the shutters like it wants to be let in, but won't say why. The rafters groan. A single spoon falls somewhere in the kitchen with the tragic dignity of a soldier collapsing in battle. You wait. Nothing follows. Just silence. Then a yawn from someone too tired to be haunted. You get up. Quiet, careful, betraying no intent. You tiptoe past the cousin, the uncle, the sibling tangle of limbs and bad dreams. Past the corner where your uncle sometimes prays loud enough to scare the fleas. The floorboards offer no loyalty. They creak anyway. You offer them a mental curse and keep moving. Outside, the night is indifferent. Cold and star-smeared and pulsing with the kind of quiet that makes you feel watched, even when you know the only thing truly watching is a squirrel with boundary issues. You look up at the moon. It looks down like it knows what you did, or didn't do. It probably saw the turnips. You walk toward the shed. You don't know why. People always walk toward the shed in stories right before the thing happens. You do it anyway. The pig snorts in her sleep. You pause to make sure she doesn't wake and file a complaint. The shed is locked, which is new. You don't remember locking it. You also don't remember owning a lock. You stare at it for a moment, then decide the lock is metaphorical. That feels like a safe thought. You head back. In the path between you and your door stands a figure. You stop, blink. It remains, tall, hooded, possibly glowing, possibly just reflecting moonlight off a very clean face. You squint. It raises one hand and points to the sky. Then it points to the ground. Then it lowers the hand and walks through the wall of your house like someone late to dinner. You wait a full minute before following. You do not wish to interrupt. Inside, everyone is asleep. No glowing figure in sight. The pig snores a little louder. You sit by the fire and poke the coals. A small voice in your head says, "That was probably just the baker in a blanket." Another voice, deeper, says, "You should have asked the turnips for clarification." You write a quick note to yourself. Do not follow glowing people into sheds, even if they seem polite. You add, "Maybe be kinder to the chickens." You glance at the corner. Nothing but shadows. Still, they seem fuller, like they've had a snack and are ready for conversation. You decide not to engage. Back in the bedding pile, someone mumbles, "The goose told me we're cursed." You don't ask for clarification. You've learned your lesson. The goose is always right and always angry. You try to sleep. You try not to think about flaming dogs, Latin vegetables, or the way the air felt heavier outside. You try not to imagine the glowing person waiting patiently behind your closed eyes. You almost succeed. Almost. The second sleep doesn't announce itself. It doesn't knock politely, or bring a gift, or ask how your evening has been. It just sort of drapes itself over you without warning, like a drunk uncle who mistakes your lap for a chair and then proceeds to tell you about the war he never fought in. You're not even sure if you're tired. You were fine a minute ago, poking coals and communing with your own poor decisions. But now, your eyelids weigh as much as the millstone, and the floor is beginning to look emotionally supportive. You don't give in right away. You try to reason with it, negotiate. You think, maybe I'll just sit here by the fire a little longer and contemplate my dreams of agricultural betrayal. Maybe I'll listen to the house breathe and the wind offer unsolicited advice through the cracks. But your body has already made its choice. Your spine surrenders first. Then your shoulders slide down like they're trying to disappear into your hips. Your neck forgets what it's for. You slump, drool a little, then catch yourself with a dramatic jerk that wakes the cat. You don't own a cat. You crawl back to the bed pile like a creature who was once a person, but has since become a blanket-seeking missile. You try to be quiet, but your knees crack like dry sticks, and your toes find every creaky board and one surprisingly vocal potato. You pause, reconsider the potato, then whisper an apology and continue. The sleeping arrangement is less a bed and more a democratic experiment in shared suffering. It is a mass of limbs, quilts, and one person who always insists on sleeping diagonally no matter what anyone says. You wedge yourself into the gap between your cousin's knees and your sister's hair, which is everywhere, like a creeping vine with dreams of expansion. Someone's elbow occupies your pillow. You do not ask who. You simply retaliate with a hip. The blanket is, as usual, missing. Not entirely, just mostly. You find one corner of it and pull. It resists. You tug again. There is a grunt. A leg kicks reflexively. A hand slaps your face. You endure this with the quiet dignity of someone who's lost this battle before. You try the ancient art of the slow roll, 1 inch at a time, absorbing fabric into your domain without waking the enemy. It works until it doesn't. Someone growls and yanks the blanket back so hard your shoulder pops. You let go, strategically. Now cold and morally wounded, you begin to debate whether second sleep is worth this. Maybe you'll go back to the fire. Maybe you'll invent a new way to sit. Maybe you'll start a rebellion and build your own bed fortress out of turnip sacks and straw pride. But then, somewhere between plotting and pouting, sleep returns. It oozes into you. Not like first sleep, which arrives with ceremony and anticipation and a list of intentions. No, this sleep is sluggish and sticky and carries the faint scent of wood smoke and resignation. It wraps around you with the stubborn insistence of a wet cloak. It settles on your chest like something mildly judgmental. You twitch once, trying to protest, but your limbs have filed for independence. Your body is no longer in committee. Your thoughts go weird, fast. You dream you're back in the turnip field, but now the turnips are hosting a town council meeting and you're late. They glare at you, all leafy disdain, as you try to explain that you couldn't find your shoes because the moon borrowed them. One turnip stands up and shouts in Latin. You agree, although you don't know what it said. Then you're falling, then flying. Then you're very sure you've turned into the pig, and the pig is trying to write a poem about you, but she keeps getting distracted by apples. Your foot twitches in real life. Someone groans. Someone else flips over and mumbles, "Tell the bishop it was the goat's idea." You make a mental note and immediately forget it. The second sleep is heavier than the first, denser, dream-soaked. You sink into it like mud, like debt, like a story told too many times by the same uncle. It doesn't refresh you. It simply holds you down and says, "Shh, shh, it's not time to think." It smells faintly of smoke, feet, and the kind of secrets that live in floorboards. You drool a little. No shame. Everyone does. The blanket shifts again. Someone rolls onto your ankle. You accept this. You have no more ankles, only a vague ache where your lower body used to be. Your arm falls asleep before the rest of you. You feel it go, like a friend slipping out the door at a bad party. In the far corner, the mouse resumes its judgmental pacing. You hear it nibbling something you hope isn't important. The fire lets out a last petulant hiss. The wind sighs. Your breathing syncs with the rhythm of the room, the slow tide of many lungs doing their best impression of peace. You dream again. This time, you're in a boat, made of bread, floating down a gravy river toward a city of geese. They chant your name, but you know they mean something else. You wake briefly to someone's knee in your ribs, smile like an idiot, and drift back under. Sleep wins. It always does. You wake up in pieces, not like a shattered mirror, more like a medieval stew. Various parts floating in confusion, none of them where they're supposed to be. Your neck has declared war. Your right arm is pinned beneath someone's knee, which might be your cousin's or might belong to a stranger who wandered in and was too polite to leave. Your left foot is wet, mysteriously. You wiggle your toes and sniff the air. You immediately regret both actions. The rooster is already mid-rant. He doesn't crow, he bellows. Every morning, he screams like he's announcing the end of days, like someone just told him about taxes. He does this directly outside the window with the broken shutter, and you swear he makes eye contact. The rooster knows what he's doing. You peel your face off the mattress, which is not actually a mattress, but more of a philosophical concept. It is straw, some fabric, and the accumulated weight of generations' disappointment. It smells like dust, soup, and someone's unresolved issues. Your face has a new pattern now. You try to sit up, but a younger sibling has sprawled sideways across your back in the night and now snores with the confidence of royalty. You shove them gently. They grunt and latch onto your arm like a barnacle made of blanket. You shift, roll, kick, and eventually extricate yourself from the bed tangle. It is less like waking and more like rebirth. Sticky, loud, and full of judgment. You stand, wobble, and immediately stub your toe on something that shouldn't be there. You whisper a curse that hasn't been invented yet. The pain radiates into your soul. The morning air is not so much cold as it is a personal insult. It wraps around your ankles and breathes down your neck like a tax collector with icy fingers. You shiver and look toward the hearth. The ashes are smug. The fire gave up hours ago and took all its warmth with it. You poke at the coals with a stick and they sigh dramatically, like you've inconvenienced them. You mumble something rude and toss on a log. It doesn't catch. Of course not. Fire has standards. Someone opens the door and lets in a gust of wind and a smell that can only be described as barn adjacent. You shout, or at least you mean to, but your throat is full of regret and your voice comes out as a raspy croak. The person ignores you, probably because they're 7 and already carrying a bucket bigger than their head. You decide to pretend you were just clearing your throat for authority. You step outside, still barefoot, because shoes are an afternoon activity. The sky is gray and the mud is ambitious. You sink slightly with every step and try not to think about what mud really island. The sun hasn't shown up yet. Just light. Diffused, passive-aggressive light that makes everything look a little worse than at island. Across the yard, the pig watches you. She knows. She always knows. You nod at her in a way that says, "Yes, I woke up wrong. No, I'm not okay. Yes, I will feed you anyway." She blinks slowly and returns to chewing something that might have been a mitten in a past life. You hear the church bell, dull and echoing like a headache. It rings not with joy or urgency, but with the exhausted tone of someone who's been doing this every day and doesn't see the point anymore. The sound wraps around the village, pulling people from beds and blankets and dreams of better lives with fewer chores. Somewhere a pot clangs. Somewhere else, someone swears creatively at a goat. You head back inside and trip over a boot that wasn't there before. You glare at it. The boot offers no apology. You pick it up and throw it gently into the corner, where it lands on a pile of things labeled later. The room smells like morning now, which is to say it smells like sweat, onions, wet wool, and unbrushed teeth. Someone is frying something in a pan that screams with every sizzle. You try to identify the ingredients, but give up when you realize you don't want to know. Your uncle is already awake, of course. He's been awake since before the concept of sleep existed. He's sitting at the table, sharpening a spoon and humming a hymn that sounds suspiciously like a threat. You nod to him. He nods back. You've never had a conversation, but you respect each other deeply, in the way only two tired people can. Your sister appears, hair in full rebellion, eyes half closed, and holding a mug of something hot and vaguely brown. She hands it to you without speaking. You sip. It burns your tongue and tastes like boiled bark, but it is warm and yours. You are now 3% more human Someone asks if it's Monday. No one knows. Someone else says it doesn't matter because the chores are the same anyway. You all agree. Days are just arbitrary labels attached to suffering. A child throws a spoon. A dog steals a sock. The rooster crows again, louder this time, as if to remind everyone he's still the most important creature in the village. You consider eating him, just for a moment. You look around. Your family moves through the morning like pieces on a worn-out game board, bumping into each other, muttering, cursing, laughing when they shouldn't. It's chaos. But it's your chaos. Familiar, itchy, too loud, often damp, but yours. You finish your drink, slap your face a few times to remind it who's boss, and grab a cloak that smells like sheep and ambition. You're ready. Not enthusiastic, not rested, but upright and vaguely functional. The sun finally peeks over the trees like it's been watching the whole time, quietly amused. You look up at it. It looks back. You don't blink. You're not ready to forgive. Breakfast is not an event. It's a negotiation between what's edible, what's warm, and what hasn't been claimed by the goat. The pot bubbles with something technically food. You recognize the porridge from yesterday, and possibly the day before that. There's a new note to it now, something smoky, something daring. You scoop some out, hoping not to stir the bottom too much. That's where regrets settle. The table is already crowded. People sit where they always do, in positions inherited like bad furniture. No one speaks right away. There's a rhythm to this. A few coughs, a loud swallow, the scraping of spoons against wooden bowls. Your brother inhales his portion like it owes him money. Your mother sips carefully, as if pretending it's tea and not sadness. The smell of burnt oats, wet wool, and faint manure wafts through the room. It's the smell of morning, not good morning, just morning. You chew with determination, not hunger. Hunger left hours ago, during the second waking, fleeing with your dignity and your last coherent dream. What's left is duty, and the faint hope that chewing faster will make it taste like something. It doesn't. It tastes like time. Specifically, a Tuesday that forgot to shower. Someone says, "Sleep well?" and immediately regrets it. The question hangs there, thick and obvious. No one answers. You all exchange glances like players in a secret society bound by shared trauma. The kind of trauma shaped like candlelight and whispered prayers and rats with a sense of entitlement. It's not that you're ashamed of the between time. It's just not for breakfast talk. It's personal, sacred, like nose-picking or tax evasion. The toddler in the corner, still sticky from unknown causes, giggles and shouts something about dreams. Everyone freezes. Your uncle coughs into his bowl. Your sister elbows the toddler gently. You all go back to chewing. Crisis averted. Someone passes a heel of bread. It's the kind of bread that could injure someone if thrown with intent. You accept it with a nod of thanks, dunking it into the porridge until it agrees to soften. It doesn't. You eat it anyway. Chewing loudly feels like rebellion. Outside, the village stirs. Hooves clop by the window. A distant cart squeaks like it's telling a long, sad story. Somewhere, a dog howls at nothing, and another dog agrees. The world is waking up, or at least pretending to, just like you. Your father stands and stretches with a noise that could scare birds. He mutters something about chores and the weather, then walks out like a man marching to battle. Your cousin follows, still tying his tunic, and trips over the cat. The cat, of course, is fine. Cats always are. You make a mental note to respect that cat and also possibly fear it. The rest of you linger, not because there's more to eat, but because the moment between breakfast and labor is the last soft thing the day offers. Your sister fiddles with a spoon, tapping it against the edge of her bowl in a rhythm that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. Your mother stares at the wall like it's just challenged her to a duel. You pretend to check your boots, which are still damp from yesterday, and also the day before, as if they've given up drying as a concept. There's comfort in the pretense, in the way everyone acts like the night was just sleep, plain and simple. No dreams of dead relatives offering tax advice. No sudden moments of wakefulness where you questioned everything, including your own name. No middle-hour conversations with the floor or flirtations with the fire or unsuccessful herbal negotiations. You look at your brother, who's now trying to balance a spoon on his nose. He almost pulls it off. Almost. You smile, which feels foreign at this hour, like wearing your festival boots to the outhouse. Still, it sticks for a second before being buried under the usual fog of dirt and duty. Someone finally speaks again, this time about the chickens. Apparently, they've become philosophical and are refusing to lay until the moon apologizes. Or maybe they're just cold. Either way, eggs are now a theoretical concept. Everyone nods solemnly. This is serious. You miss eggs the way some people miss spring. You rise from the table with the grace of a broken rake. Your joints creak. Your back reminds you that sleeping in a human pile has long-term consequences. You gather bowls, stack them precariously, and head toward the wash basin with the enthusiasm of someone sentenced to mild, wet penance. Your mother hums as she tidies. It's not a happy tune. It's the kind of melody that says, "I've seen things, and I'm still here." You hum with her, quietly, not in harmony but in shared rhythm. It's enough. The pot is nearly empty. The fire crackles as if mocking your attempt at normalcy. You toss a splinter of wood on it, and it accepts the offering without gratitude. Outside, someone yells about a missing sheep. Someone else yells back that the sheep is probably just trying to find a better village. You wonder if that's possible. The sun finally peers in, late and smug, filtering through the warped window pane. It lights the dust in the air, making it look almost magical. You squint and pretend it's intentional, that this day, like all the others, is manageable. No one mentions the between time, not the wakefulness, not the candlelight, not the whispered poems or the remembered ghosts, or the slight moan the wind made that may have been a voice or just bad insulation. No one dares. You wrap your cloak around you, step outside, and face the morning as if it hasn't already been several lifetimes long, as if you didn't already live a whole secret life between sleeps. As if normal were ever anything but a costume everyone agrees to wear, frayed at the edges, patched with silence. The rooster sees you and crows again, louder this time. You stare back. You say nothing. But you think it loud. You ask around because the question itches. Not like a rash, but like a thought with splinters. Why does no one sleep all the way through? Why do your nights split themselves in two like a loaf shared too early? You don't get an answer, not one you can use. You get a handful of half-truths, one shrug, and a proverb that might also be a recipe. The priest says the midnight hour is sacred, that God listens best when the world is still. You nod politely, trying not to ask why God can't keep regular office hours. The steward insists it's about efficiency. Split sleep allows time to check the fires, wind the clocks, mend a hem, stir the stew, write in the ledger. You don't even have a ledger, but he's so pleased with himself that you let him finish his lecture while imagining his face on a turnip. The old women by the well are less interested in justifying it. They wave their hands like the whole concept of linear time is beneath them. People wake when they wake, one says while shelling peas with surgical precision. And then they go back to sleep. Always have, always will. Stop asking silly questions before the butter turns sour. You don't understand what butter has to do with it, but you leave it there. Your uncle, when cornered, simply shrugs and says, "Because we're not cows, lad." He says it like it ends the conversation. You stare at him. He stares back, entirely unbothered. Then he sneezes into his sleeve and mutters something about mushrooms being cleverer than most people. You've learned that, with your uncle, the sneezing is the punctuation mark. You consider his answer. You are, in fact, not a cow. This seems both true and entirely useless. You wonder if the answer is simpler. Maybe people wake up in the middle of the night because they're cold, because the fire dies down, because someone kicks them, because a dream ends and real life sneaks back in like a leaky roof. Maybe it's just that darkness stretches too long and our brains, like goats, refuse to behave for that long uninterrupted. Or maybe it's older than that. Older than fire, older than beds, older than the idea that sleep should come in a tidy package. You think about it while staring at your bowl of barley mush, which is trying to impersonate soup. You think about it while mending your sock, which is more whole than wool. You think about it while pretending to listen to your cousin argue with the neighbor about whether pigs dream in color. The answer apparently depends on the pig. You think about it when you're awake at that strange hour, the one too late to still be night and too early to call it morning, when the world hums in a quieter key and the mice seem philosophical. It doesn't feel like a mistake, this waking. It feels like an intermission. Everyone treats it like it's normal, not worth commenting on. No one says, "I woke up at the in-between again." They say, "I stirred the pot at midnight," or "I fixed the hem," or "the bread rose well," or sometimes, "I couldn't sleep." But they say it like it's the weather, predictable, cyclical, a thing that happens to everyone. No one panics. No one calls it broken. You begin to realize that sleep, here, is not a single door you close. It's a hallway. You walk through it, sometimes twice. There are words for it. First sleep, second sleep. They pass between lips like breadcrumbs. You hear a man at the market say he had dreams during the first and nightmares during the second. You hear a woman at the river say she always does her weaving between sleeps. That's when her hands are clearest. That's when the pattern comes. The children don't question it. They nap like cats, in piles and patches, whenever they can, wherever they fall. No one demands they consolidate their slumber. They are allowed to be wild with it. You wonder when that stops. When someone says, "Sleep must happen this way," and hands you a schedule and a list of chores. When the in-between becomes inconvenient, it's not written down, not carved in stone or declared by kings, but everyone does it. Everyone knows. Even the dogs, especially the dogs. There's something about it that feels old. Older than the buildings, older than the language, like a tradition handed down by silence. Like a song you don't remember learning but somehow know all the words to. You stop expecting it to make sense. You just feel it. The middle hour has a texture, a scent, candle wax and damp wool, ink and onion. Sometimes bread if you're lucky. Sometimes regret if you're not. It's when your thoughts stretch their legs, when the room feels bigger or smaller than it should, when you think about people you miss and people you wish you missed less. Maybe that's why we do this. Not because the priest says it's holy, though maybe at Island. Not because the steward likes to measure things, though he will. Not because the old women told you to stop asking. Not even because we're not cows, though your uncle has a point. Maybe it's because being human is too complicated to fit into one sleep. Maybe some thoughts need their own time. Maybe the soul wakes when the body rests, and they need a moment to catch up. You don't ask again, not because you have the answer, because you don't need it anymore. You just light your candle. You sip something warm and vaguely herbal. You watch the shadows stretch across the walls and listen for the house breathing. You hear someone cough. Someone else turns over. A floorboard sighs. The fire mutters to itself. You scratch an itch you didn't know you had. And when second sleep finally comes, you let it. Not because it's time, but because you're ready. The fire is mostly ash again. You prod it half-heartedly with the stick you've declared the good poker, though it's really just a twig that hasn't disappointed you yet. A faint glow sulks at the base of the hearth like a child sent to bed without supper. You breathe on it like that'll help. It doesn't, but you do it anyway because doing something feels better than staring at the ceiling waiting for sleep to forget it already visited you once tonight. You're not alone. You know that. Not in the larger spiritual sense, though someone's great-grandmother probably is watching from the rafters. But in the physical, practical, inescapable sense, the house is full, stuffed with relatives like a pie you didn't order but now have to eat. Everyone tangled in linen and snoring and muttering and producing sounds that don't quite belong to mammals. The dog is asleep on someone's foot, hopefully yours, hopefully not your cousin's because he kicks. You're awake in the space that doesn't have a name. Not really. Some call it the watch. Some call it God's hour, which feels ambitious. You just call it the between, though only in your head, because saying it out loud would make it sound like a forest spirit might show up to offer you a quest. You don't want a quest. You want your blanket back and for your bladder to make up its mind. This waking is not an accident. You know that now. You used to think you were just bad at sleeping, like maybe your body missed a meeting where the rest of humanity agreed to stay unconscious for 8 hours straight. Turns out, the meeting didn't happen. Or if it did, it was recent, and sponsored by people who sell coffee. This rhythm, this break, this pause. It's old. Older than the roof over your head. Older than the Latin phrases carved into the church door. Older even than the stories your grandmother won't finish because they aren't proper for daylight. You wake, not because something's wrong, but because something is meant. The night is meant to break. There's something comforting in it. You sit by the hearth and let the heat lick your knees while the shadows behave themselves for once. You can hear the wind pulling at the thatch and the occasional sigh of someone remembering a better dream. Somewhere outside, an owl hoots with the conviction of someone who knows the gossip and isn't afraid to hoot about it. You think maybe this time was carved out on purpose, a space tucked between the folds of darkness to be used however you like, to pray, to mend, to write, or to think, or to whisper secrets to someone who may or may not still be awake, to exist without being needed, to be still without being idle. The house doesn't feel asleep so much as paused. You can feel the weight of everyone else's dreams in the air, heavy, steaming slightly. Some people believe this is when the soul stretches, when it uncoils from the body like a cat from under a chair, yawns, and takes a walk through memory. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's just what happens when porridge is your main food group and your pillow is filled with hay and judgment. You remember being told once, by someone who read a book, or at least stood near one, that ancient people used this time to talk to God. Not the loud, ask for things kind of talk, but the quiet, hey, it's just me kind. The kind you have when you're not sure anyone's listening, but you speak anyway because maybe, just maybe, they are. Or maybe it's just you, and that's fine too. You try it once. A whisper into the dark. Nothing fancy. Just a, well, here I am, followed by silence. Not the kind of silence that ignores you, the kind that listens. You don't hear a voice, but you do feel a little less like you're the only one awake in the world. That's the trick of it. This middle time doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. It slips in and waits for you to notice. And if you don't, it's fine. It'll be back tomorrow and the day after. It always has been. You think of the stories your cousin tells, the ones he's not supposed to, about witches and wolves and things with eyes that glow where no eyes should be. He says they come during the in-between, when even the moon is tired and forgets to watch. You laugh at him to his face and then check the door 3 times before bed. There's a freedom here, a softness, like the night lets go of its edges. You can read if you want. You can weep if you need. You can eat a cold potato with your fingers, and no one will judge you, because everyone else is dreaming of better things. This is when people tell the truth, or at least, when they stop lying to themselves. You remember hearing your sister mutter once during this hour. Not words, just sounds. But there was a gentleness to it, like she was speaking to someone kind, someone who hadn't spoken back in years but still deserved to be addressed. Maybe this is what we were always supposed to do: break our nights in half like bread and share it between the selves we show and the ones we don't. When sleep does come again, it won't be because you forced it. It'll sneak up behind you, wrap itself around your shoulders, and drag you back into dreams you don't remember. You'll go, not because you must, but because you've done what the night asked of you. You don't know why this is the way at Island. No one does. Not really. But the night is for breaking. So you do. The bells ring before sense wakes up. A low, mournful groan of iron and obligation that seeps through walls and dreams like smoke. You jolt up in the hayloft, where the monastery lets you sleep when your cousin decides your snoring is a sin. It's dark. Not just absence of sun dark. It's ancient dark. Bible dark. You pull your blanket around your shoulders and listen. They're singing again. Matins. You don't know why it's called that when nothing about it feels like a morning. The monks file into the chapel like sleepy shadows, robes swishing, bare feet slapping stone with the defeated rhythm of men who haven't had porridge yet. No one speaks. No one needs to. This is a place of prayer, and also deeply repressed yawning. Brother Cuthbert once told you that waking at this hour purifies the soul. He said it with the haunted look of someone who's been purified into a husk. You asked him once if God really needed prayers at 2 a.m, and he said, "It's not for God. It's to keep us from forgetting we're not Him." Fair enough. The chant begins low. Latin, of course. Words older than the building. You don't know them, but you feel them anyway. Long vowels, soft syllables, a rhythm like waves breaking gently on the shore of someone else's guilt. You sit in the shadows at the back of the chapel, not exactly welcome, but not asked to leave either. That's the monastery way. If you don't cause trouble, you're allowed to exist quietly in proximity to holiness. Matins is strange. Not quite music, not quite silence. It's the sound of men trying to summon meaning from the bottom of their lungs while wondering if their blankets are still warm back in the dormitory. Some chant with fervor. Some chant like they've made peace with the fact that this is simply their life now. One monk, possibly Brother Anselm, sings a half beat behind everyone else, like he's not entirely convinced by the calendar. You're pretty sure one of them is asleep standing up. No one will say it. But this hour isn't about divine inspiration. It's about structure. A rhythm carved into the darkness so the soul doesn't drift too far into dreaming. The monks say it's for vigilance, a spiritual watchfulness. You suspect it's also because monks are human, and humans have always woken in the middle of the night to ask questions no one else wants to hear. Brother Cuthbert told you about that too. Said people used to come to the monastery not for healing or confession, but to sit in the back of the chapel during matins, to be near something steady, to feel less alone in the kind of dark that makes you forget your name. He once found a woman from the village sitting in the corner with her baby, both of them wide-eyed and silent, like they weren't sure which of them had cried first. He let them stay. You shift on your hay bale and pull your knees to your chest. The chant drones on, a lullaby for the part of you that can't sleep. You find yourself humming along, not quite in tune, not quite wrong. The chapel smells like wax and cold stone, and the lingering breath of onions. It's holy in the way that cabbage soup is holy when you're very, very hungry. The monks bow at the right times. They cross themselves. One of them sneezes and no one flinches, which feels like a small miracle. They've done this so many nights it's woven into them like wool into a blanket. You wonder if any of them even remembers what it was like to sleep through until dawn without being summoned by bells and the ancient guilt of being too well rested. There is one candle lit at the altar. It flickers with the practiced grace of someone used to being stared at. The flame is tiny, but the shadows it casts are large and uncertain. You watch them ripple across the monk's robes like fish in deep water. You wonder if God watches too, or if he's curled up somewhere warm, letting the angels do the night shift. When matins ends, there's no applause, no nods, just quiet. The monks file out as they came, heavier now, like they've dropped something behind. Maybe their fear, maybe their dreams, maybe just the thought that the night would end without effort. You stay seated until the last of them disappears into the corridor, robes whispering secrets you're not invited to hear. Brother Cuthbert passes by you on his way out. He doesn't say anything, just pats your head like you're a cat and he's forgotten he's allergic. His hand smells like beeswax and old books. You watch him disappear into the cloister with the slow, dignified gait of a man who has accepted that his entire life is structured around preventing sleep. You remain for a while longer. The chapel is empty now, but it still hums faintly, like the stones are trying to remember the words just sung. You think about how even monks, the most disciplined, most cloistered, most oat-loving people you know, break their sleep in two, one part for the body, one part for something else, something uncertain, something unnameable, but deeply felt. Maybe the monks do it not because they're more devout, but because they're more human, because they, like you, wake up in the dark with thoughts too loud to ignore. And instead of pretending otherwise, they gather in the cold and sing into it. Together, off-key, sometimes, but sincerely. The candle sputters, the silence deepens, and outside, somewhere beyond the chapel walls, an owl cries. Not a hoot, a cry, long and aching, like it knows something you don't. Brother Cuthbert swears that owl has been watching him for years. Claims it cried the night his mother died, and the night the roof collapsed over the scriptorium. You're not sure if he's telling the truth or just making conversation. But either way, it fits. You stand and stretch. Your legs are numb, and your soul slightly less so. The dark is still dark, but it doesn't feel as lonely now. You wrap your blanket tighter and head back toward your corner in the loft. You'll sleep again. Eventually. But not before you whisper a few words into the silence. Not a prayer. Exactly. Just a reminder that you're here, and the monks are too. You hear it before you see anything. The creak of a door that's trying not to be a door, the rustle of fabric against stone, the unmistakable sound of someone making a bad decision with admirable stealth. It's the middle hour, the sacred between, and while the pious pray and the tired pretend they're not awake, some people, some very specific people, choose this moment for mischief. Not the loud kind, not murder or shouting, or livestock theft. This is the time of quiet crimes, whisper-level sins, transgressions that slide under the door like cold air and old gossip. The floor is cold, your blanket's tangled around your legs, and your youngest cousin just mumbled something deeply unholy in his sleep. But you're alert now, wide-eyed in the dark like a guilty cat. You sit up slowly. Listen harder. There it is again. The soft thump of bare feet on packed earth, moving with the confidence of someone who's either done this 100 times or absolutely never thought it through. You rise like a bat from a haystack, clutching your cloak like it's a disguise. Your candle is long dead, so you move in the dark, guided by familiarity, suspicion, and the smell of pickled something. It's your aunt, of course at Island. You catch her in the yard, crouched like a suspicious mushroom by the herb bed. She holds something in her arms, a jar. You know that jar. It used to contain eggs. It still might. She doesn't notice you at first, too busy digging into the frost-stiff soil with the handle of a spoon. You want to say something, but there's a certain etiquette to observing a nocturnal crime in progress. You wait. She finishes the hole, lowers the jar in, with the reverence of someone burying a small, briny relative, and pats the earth down firmly. Then, finally, she looks up. Her eyes widen when she sees you, and for a moment you think she's going to yell. Instead, she holds one finger to her lips and whispers, "Don't tell your uncle. He'd dig it up." You nod, because of course he would. He's always had suspicions about her relationship with eggs. Back inside, you wrap yourself back in your blanket, but But the house feels different now, charged, like the air's been stirred by secrets. In the next room, someone coughs twice and then goes silent again. The fire pops, as if in judgment. You don't sleep. You listen. The village is not asleep either. You hear them. The others. Doors cracking open, boots on dirt, a snort of laughter quickly muffled. Once, you see a girl dart across the lane with something tucked under her shawl. It could be a loaf of bread. It could be a love letter. It could be her family's last potato. You'll never know, and that's the point. There's a code here. Everyone knows about it. No one speaks it aloud. Some people use this hour for confessions whispered between blankets, the kind that don't need a priest, just ears that won't repeat. Secrets like, I saw him kiss the cooper's daughter, or I dropped the soap in the well and said nothing. Minor sins, community glue. You once heard your brother admit to eating the priest's chicken on a dare. He still hasn't atoned. The priest probably deserved it anyway. Others use this time to write things that cannot be said. You've seen the baker's apprentice scratching notes in charcoal behind the oven. Love poems. Bad ones, full of metaphors involving yeast. He hands them to the miller's son, who never says thank you but always keeps them in his sleeve. You don't ask questions. You just watch. Sometimes there are rendezvous. You know because your window faces the back lane and you're a nosy person by nature. You've seen hands touch in the dark and not let go. Seen cloaks flutter like wings and boots trip over roots because romance is clumsy and uneven. One time, you saw two people kiss and then both sneeze from the cold. Love, you suppose. Your cousin once tried to sneak out to meet someone. She tripped over the dog, woke the whole house, and claimed she was checking the moon for witch signs. You're still not sure if anyone bought it, but the dog got extra dinner for a week. There are other kinds of crimes too. Quiet rebellions. People who walk into the woods and don't say why. People who dig little holes and hide little things. Coins, tokens, a lock of hair wrapped in cloth. You've done it too. Once you buried a wooden horse behind the barn. You didn't like that it stared at you in the dark. You told no one. That night, you dreamed of hooves. You haven't unearthed it. This hour makes people strange, or maybe it just reveals the strangeness that's already there. The day demands roles. The night allows tendencies. In daylight, you are a helpful nephew. In the between time, you are a blanket-clad detective of human oddity. You've learned to respect it. The hour passes slowly, like honey that's forgotten how to pour. Eventually, people return to their beds, crimes committed or deferred. You lie back down and stare at the ceiling like it owes you answers. You think about the pickled eggs. You think about your aunt's face, oddly serene. You think about the girl with the potato loaf letter and wonder if she made it. You drift, not fully asleep, not fully awake. Your mind tumbles like a sock in the wind. You dream, not of fire or fields or feast days, but of secrets, burying them, digging them up, handing them over like warm bread wrapped in cloth. The rooster crows once, off-key, regretfully. The house shifts. The second sleep beckons. But before it takes you, you whisper a vow to remember what you saw tonight, to keep it safe. Except the thing about quiet crimes is that they fade. That's how they survive. Sometimes the worst part is when nothing happens. Not the cold, not the snoring, not even the goat scratching its name into the doorframe again. Just the stillness. The kind that hums between your ears like a secret you forgot to keep. You lie there with your hands folded over your stomach like you're already halfway to being a ghost. Everyone else is breathing too loud. Your thoughts are louder. You stare up through the hole in the thatch that you keep meaning to fix and count stars until you forget how numbers work. There's that one bright one, probably Mars, or a demon, or some kind of flaming celestial chicken. No one in the village can agree. The priest says it's a sign of God's watchfulness. Your cousin says it's a dead knight who got promoted. You think it's just trying to mind its own business and wishes people would stop naming it things. But it's up there, flickering like it's trying to blink back. You blink back. The thatch lets in just enough sky to make you feel small in a way that isn't entirely unpleasant. It's a reminder. You are a person on a spinning piece of earth that refuses to stop being inconvenient. You are also a person lying awake at the hour when even the chickens are second-guessing their life choices. You're not a philosopher. You're just tired. And yet, your thoughts will not behave. They get ideas at this hour, the kind of ideas that feel important until morning shows up and pees on everything. You remember things you didn't say. You rehearse arguments you didn't win. You invent elaborate schemes to make your life easier, all of which involve someone else doing your chores. You wonder what would happen if you ran away to the forest and lived off moss. You'd die, probably, but at least it wouldn't involve pigs. You think about your future. Then you stop. You think about bread. That's safer. The stars continue their relentless glowing. You try to match their rhythm. Inhale when they twinkle. Exhale when they don't. It doesn't work. You're not sure how long it's been. Time has turned into soup again. You curl one leg under the other to keep your foot from freezing off. It's like sleeping in a hay-filled snow globe where someone's replaced the snow with existential dread. You hear someone murmur, maybe a dream, maybe a prayer. You listen for more, but it fades into the straw. A baby whines in a house nearby. The silence that follows is deeper than before, like the world just blinked. You wonder if the king sleeps like this. Probably not. Kings have things, layers, down-stuffed mattresses, servants to soothe their feet, probably a robe made of whispering mink. You've heard they even get up to pee in golden pots. You're not even sure your chamber pot counts as a pot anymore. It's more of a hopeful bucket, but kings also have guilt. You have a cough. You pull the blanket tighter and pretend it's armor. Not the shiny kind, more like the kind made out of old sweaters and delusion. Still, it helps. The wind is talking again, sliding under the door, licking at your toes like a judgmental cat. You hum to yourself, not a song, just sound, a little buffer between you and the stars. They're still looking at you. You try not to take it personally. You remember a story your grandmother told you once about a man who slept with his eyes open. Everyone thought he was wise, but really, he just had insomnia and bad luck. You wonder if he stared at the sky too, or if he stared at the ceiling and imagined it was the sky. You try that for a bit, but your ceiling has a spider, and the spider has opinions. You count the thatch lines instead. 1, 2. Wait, you already counted that one. You go backward. You get lost. You consider naming each reed like you did with the chickens that one winter. Only 2 of those chickens survived, and one of them is definitely evil. Your mind slips again. You think about your childhood, how you used to believe stars were pinholes in God's curtain. Now you know better. Now you know they're just far. You still like your version more. Someone turns over beside you, arm flopping onto your face like a forgotten ham. You shift it gently and resist the urge to bite. You're not that kind of tired. Not yet. You consider getting up, maybe reading a psalm or poking the fire or chewing on something bitter and medicinal, but you don't move, because despite everything, the cold, the noise, the thoughts, you're also sort of content. Not happy, not exactly, just settled, like a loaf that's given up rising but still smells okay. Eventually, your eyes droop. You blink slower. The stars seem to dim, or maybe your vision just gives up. The ceiling returns. The spider retreats. Your thoughts tangle themselves into softer shapes. Less guilt, more bread. Less kings, more cows. The air shifts. Sleep doesn't come with trumpets. It seeps, and as it does, you forget the stars. Just for a little while, you wake with a start, and the first thing you notice is your teeth. They're clattering together like dice in a gambler's palm, sharp little noises that make you feel less like a person and more like a percussion instrument. The second thing you notice is the cold. Not crisp cold, not refreshing cold. Mean cold. The kind of cold that sneaks into your bones and sets up shop. You pull the blanket higher, but it's already stiff with frost at the edges. You don't even need to check the hearth. You know, the fire died. It didn't go out gracefully, like an old sage passing into legend. It quit, slipped away in the middle of the night, leaving behind a few sulking embers and the faint smell of disappointment. You debate rebuilding it. Of course you do. You imagine dragging yourself upright, fumbling for twigs, coaxing a flame out of stubborn sparks, feeding it until it glows again. You picture the warmth on your face, the glow bouncing off the walls, the relief flooding your body like hot soup. Then you picture the work, and the frost outside, and the possibility of stepping on a mouse. You decide no, you're not that strong. Not tonight, not in this in-between hour, when even your blood seems to have slowed to half speed. Instead, you slide closer to your brother. He reacts as expected, which is to say, badly. He kicks you in the shin, with the precision of someone who's been preparing for this moment his entire life. You snore like a possessed goat, he mumbles, words slurred with sleep and contempt. You consider pointing out that he snores too, and not like a goat but like a blacksmith trapped inside a barrel. Instead, you accept the insult. Fair enough. Goats, at least, are resourceful. The rest of the bed is no better. Arms and legs everywhere, a battlefield of elbows and knees. Your cousin has somehow claimed the blanket's best corner and wrapped herself like a smug caterpillar. Someone's foot, large and unwashed, rests on your ribs. You contemplate biting it. You don't, mostly because you can't feel your jaw anymore. The house groans. Not loudly, just the occasional stretch of wood, the sigh of the thatch, the drip of melting frost through a crack. It feels alive, though not in a friendly way. More like it resents you, as if it, too, noticed the fire's betrayal and blames you personally. You try to bury yourself deeper in the straw, pulling it over your shoulders like an extra blanket, but the straw is damp. Damp with what? You don't want to know. The smell suggests goat or cousin. You squeeze your eyes shut and try to trick your body back into warmth by sheer force of imagination. You picture sunshine, meadows, that one time the bread came out of the oven without being burned. It doesn't help. You're still shivering, and your toes are staging a quiet rebellion. Someone coughs in their sleep, a rough, chest-deep cough that rattles the rafters. You freeze, partly from cold and partly from fear that it might be contagious. Everyone is sick these days. Everyone always island. You hold your breath. Wait, then exhale when the coughing stops. The embers glow faintly, mocking you. They're not gone. Not yet. Just lazy. If you wanted, you could feed them. You could blow gently, add kindling, coax life back. The thought needles you. A better person would do it. A warmer person would do it. You roll over, away from the hearth, and choose cowardice. The cold digs in deeper, but so does your stubbornness. You try to listen past your own misery. Outside, the wind prowls like a thief. It sneaks through the cracks and fingers your hair. Somewhere in the yard, the cow shifts heavily, probably cursing her fate in cow language. The rooster makes a confused half-crow, realizes his mistake, and goes silent again. Even he's cold. You feel a flicker of solidarity. Your brother kicks you again. This time it's less sharp, more accidental. You take it as an invitation and press closer. He groans, swats at you blindly, then gives up. Warmth creeps back slowly, grudgingly, like a cat deciding to sit on your lap after weeks of disdain. Not enough to stop the shivering, just enough to convince you you're not about to die of exposure in your own bed. You wonder if this is how everyone wakes in the middle hour, fighting with blankets, bargaining with fires, pretending their toes still exist. You wonder if anyone, anywhere, has mastered the art of staying warm without effort. Probably kings. Kings with feather beds and servants to poke fires on their behalf. Kings who never wake with a stranger's heel in their mouth. But then again, kings have other problems. Wars, plots, assassins. Maybe they'd trade all of that for one cold night with straw in their hair. Probably not. The embers flare once, just for a second. Enough to throw a faint orange glow on the wall. Enough to make you think about what might be watching from the dark corners of the room. You turn away quickly, better not to know. You close your eyes again, force your breathing slow. In, out. Pretend you're already warm. Pretend the fire still burns. Pretend your brother's snores are not the herald of doom, but a lullaby. Eventually, something gives. Not the cold. It's still there, clinging like guilt. But your body surrenders, dragging you under into another sleep. When you wake again, it will be morning. The fire will still be dead. But for now, you let the dark have you. Doctors don't write about it. Not the physicians with their jars of leeches and their pockets of dried herbs. Not the scholars in their cloisters with quills sharp enough to dissect the very idea of the moon. They write about humors, about bile and blood and phlegm, about how onions will cure what worms cause. But they don't write about this. They don't mention the middle hour, the broken night, the fact that everyone wakes like a clock striking wrong. They act like you should just sleep from dusk to dawn, tidy and seamless, as if your body were a barn door that can be shut and latched. But you know better. You live it. Every night you wake. And every night you see the village wake too, one shadow at a time, each person silently complicit in a science no one has studied. It's not insomnia, not the curse of tossing endlessly in the dark while your mind gnaws its own bones. It's not failure, not weakness. It's something else. Something deliberate, though no one would admit to planning it. You wake, you live a little, you sleep again, always in 2 acts. The rhythm is so ordinary that no one even marks it as strange. Except, of course, when you try to explain it out loud. Then people shrug, or smirk, or tell you to pray. But still, when the fire dies and the silence thickens, you hear the cough of a neighbor, the squeak of a floorboard, the hush of someone ladling soup they don't want to share. Everyone is awake. Everyone is pretending otherwise. You step outside one night, barefoot on frozen mud, to prove it. The moon hangs low and cocky, a slice of silver daring you to keep your balance. You look across the cottages, roofs hunched under frost. From more than one chimney, smoke rises again. A second breath. Someone else stokes a fire at the same hour. Someone else couldn't sleep, or wouldn't. The sound carries too. The faint scrape of a door, the bark of a dog suddenly silenced, a lullaby hummed by a woman who will claim at sunrise that she slept like a stone. The lie is communal. The truth is unspoken. You think about what it means. That people live in 2 worlds, night and day, but also in the half-life between them. This little hour, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, isn't wasted. It's used. Bread is kneaded, wood is split, prayers are whispered, babies are made, secrets are whispered. You wonder if this is what scholars fear. That the truth of life isn't neat or measurable. That human rhythm isn't one straight line from dawn to dusk, but a loop, a braid, a broken circle tied together by shadows. You picture the monks in their cloister, writing neat lines by candlelight. They'd never admit it, but they wake too. They have words for it. Matins, vigils, hours. They wrap the truth in Latin and pretend it's discipline, not biology. But you've seen them, bleary-eyed, shuffling toward the chapel like reluctant ghosts. They don't study it because they're inside it, same as you, same as everyone. Sometimes you wonder if the body knows something the mind has forgotten, if there's wisdom in waking, in sitting with the quiet. You think about the way thoughts stretch during these hours. They're longer somehow, softer, less boxed in by chores and daylight. You've had ideas at this hour that would never dare show their faces at noon. You've felt feelings that the rooster would mock if he crowed them awake. Maybe that's why no one writes about it, because it isn't meant for daylight. Half the village is awake. You know this. The other half is faking it. They turn over noisily. They snore exaggeratedly. They breathe too loudly. You've done it yourself. Pretended you were asleep when your uncle whispered to the floorboards, when your aunt tiptoed outside with a jar, when your sister recited a psalm backwards because she thought it might cure her rash. Everyone pretends, but you can hear it. The rustle of wakefulness, the heartbeat of activity, you know. And there's something binding in that, a fellowship of the unslept. No one shakes hands or swears oaths, but you all share this secret hour, passing it among you like contraband. You nod at each other at market, eyes ringed with shadow, not mentioning it but knowing. The baker doesn't tell you his dough is always ready by dawn because he needs it at midnight. The shepherd doesn't admit he walks the field in the dark because he can't stay in bed. The midwife never says that half the babies she delivers come screaming into the world at a time that technically doesn't exist. None of it's written, but all of it's true. You sit by the hearth and watch the embers wink like tiny conspirators. You think, this is more than routine. It's ritual. Not the holy kind with incense and bells, but the lived kind. The kind that happens whether you want it or not, whether you name it or not. A ritual of being awake together in secret, of breaking the night like bread and handing the pieces around. You imagine someday someone will study it. Some scholar with nothing better to do will scribble in a book. The medieval people did not sleep like us. They slept in 2 parts. And others will marvel, centuries from now, as if it were strange, as if it were alien, as if they had never themselves woken at 3 a.m. and stared at the ceiling wondering why. They'll call it quaint. They'll call it curious. They won't know it was simply life. For now, no one writes it down. Doctors don't prescribe it. Priests don't preach it. Scholars don't annotate it. But you live it. You all do. Night after night, century after century, slipping between dreams and duty, between silence and firelight, between first sleep and second. And you don't need to study it to know it matters. You're awake. The village is awake. The world is awake. Just don't tell anyone. You feel it before you notice anything else. Not sound exactly, not movement either, but something beneath both. A pressure, a rhythm, like the ground itself is breathing under you. You lie still, eyes open to the dark, and the sensation builds until you know the night has a pulse. It doesn't throb like a wound, and it doesn't thunder like festival drums. It hums, low and steady, like bees in a distant hive, like a song half remembered by the earth. At first you think it's your imagination. You've been awake too long after all, and your brain is fond of playing tricks at this hour. But then you hear your brother sigh in his sleep, long and rattling, and the sound folds itself neatly into the beat. You hear your cousin kick, a dull thump against the bed frame, and that too fits into the rhythm. Even the fire, what's left of it, crackles once, as if on cue. You realize you're not inventing it. You're noticing it. The night isn't still at all. It only pretends to be. You listen harder. Outside, the cow shifts her weight, hooves scraping frozen ground. A dog barks once, short and sharp, then goes silent, as if remembering it's rude to interrupt. The wind snakes along the thatch, not howling, not whispering, but murmuring with the cadence of something ancient and bored. Every noise is part of it, even the silence, especially the silence. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the knot of limbs beside you. Everyone else is asleep, or pretending to be, but their presence makes the air heavy. Breathing, dreaming, sweating, shivering. It all joins the hum. You've lived among these people your whole life, fought with them over bread crusts and chores, envied them, ignored them. But in this hour, they're all bound together. A single organism with many lungs. The family, the cottage, the whole village. One body at rest and unrest. You press your palm against the floorboards. They're cold, but you swear you can feel it there too, faint and patient, a vibration that doesn't stop. You wonder if the pulse is inside you or outside, if it's blood moving through veins, or time moving through night, or something larger, something that refuses to separate the two. There are nights when you think it's God, not the stern, distant God of daylight sermons, but a softer one, a God who hums to himself while waiting for dawn, a God who doesn't mind being interrupted with clumsy prayers at odd hours. You almost speak to him, but the pulse says enough without words. Other nights, you think it's just people, the collective restlessness of neighbors stirring in their beds, of bakers already measuring flour, of shepherds listening for wolves, of widows whispering to the dead. All their small movements accumulate until the village itself feels alive, like the walls have veins, the chimneys breath, the roads stretch like tendons under frost. You could swear you hear the square itself sigh. The sensation unsettles you. It's not dangerous, not frightening, but it refuses to let you remain separate. You can't claim to be just one person alone in the dark. You're part of something larger, something awake when it shouldn't be, something breathing when the world swears it's still. You think of the stars overhead, hidden now by roof and thatch but still burning. You imagine they too throb faintly, syncing with this pulse. That somewhere in the vast black entire worlds beat along with yours, unaware but connected. It's ridiculous, of course. The priest would scold you for blasphemy. Your uncle would laugh. Your brother would call you stupid and steal your blanket. But lying there, hand pressed to the floor, you can almost believe it. You wonder if animals feel it too. If the ox shifts not from cold, but from some instinctual recognition of rhythm. If the mice darting in the corners move in time with the same beat. You even wonder about the turnips in the cellar. Are they humming quietly in their own way, growing in sync with a pulse no scholar has thought to measure? The fire sputters and exhales a puff of smoke. You lean toward it, not for warmth, but to watch the way it glows in time. The embers blink like eyes, not entirely random, like they're keeping beat. You try to hum along, but your voice cracks, too clumsy for something this steady. Still, the sound comforts you. This pulse is no accident. It isn't chaos. It's rhythm disguised as silence. You begin to think the whole reason for first and second sleep is this hour in the middle, when the world pretends to be still but is actually the most alive. The time when everything breathes together. You know you'll never be able to explain it without sounding mad, but you know it anyway. Someone stirs beside you, a muttered word, maybe a name. Their voice blends into the hum, then fades again. You wonder if they feel it in their sleep, if dreams too beat in time with the pulse. Maybe that's why second sleep comes easier than the first. The body sinks to something larger, surrenders to its rhythm, and drifts. You lie back down, pulling the blanket over your head, but you keep your hand pressed against the floorboards. You don't want to lose the connection just yet. You feel it still, low, steady, undeniable. A drum no one beats, a song no one sings, a heart no one owns. The night has a pulse, and you belong to it. When it comes, it doesn't crash into you the way first sleep does, all tangled blankets and arguments about who gets the warm corner. It slides in like a tide, quiet and insistent, washing over the restless thoughts that kept you pacing the floor or staring at the rafters as if they'd blink back. Second sleep is softer. It doesn't demand. It suggests. It beckons. And you follow, not because you must, but because you finally can. You don't fight it this time. The worries that gnawed at you earlier, the fire going out, the bucket left outside, the vague guilt of forgetting something important, but not remembering what, those things lose their teeth. They become background noise, like a dog barking in another village, faint enough to ignore. Your body, stiff and stubborn for hours, lets go. Your shoulders loosen, your jaw unclenches. Even your toes, frozen in their eternal rebellion, surrender to the warmth creeping in from borrowed limbs and shared blankets. The bed is no softer. The straw still pricks, the blanket still smells faintly of goat, and someone's foot is still pressed into your side. But it doesn't matter now. You've burned through your restlessness. You've exhausted your complaints. What's left is a heaviness that feels like honesty. Second, sleep doesn't ask for perfection. It accepts you as you are, cold, cramped, and vaguely annoyed. And somehow, that makes it sweeter. You roll onto your back and stare up one last time. The ceiling looms, patched and uneven, but kinder now. You trace the lines of the beams in the dark and feel your eyes blur. The pulse of the night you felt earlier still thrums faintly beneath you, but instead of keeping you awake, it cradles you, rocking you toward dreams you won't remember. You breathe slower, deeper. For the first time in hours, your body feels heavier than your thoughts. Maybe that's why it works. The noise has already had its chance. All the doubts and plans and half-formed regrets have marched their laps around your skull, and now they're tired too. You gave them their hour, and in return, they give you peace. Second sleep is the truce. You don't dream about solving anything. You just dream. Your brother mutters something in his sleep and shifts, stealing half the blanket. You don't even care. Normally, you'd elbow him, claim your share, start a silent war of tug and kick. Now, you let it go. You even find the exposed edge of cold air oddly pleasant. A reminder that the warmth you do have is enough. The goat outside makes a strange, choking noise, possibly demonic, possibly digestive. You smile as your mind folds the sound into a dream before it can become a worry. The house breathes with you. Someone sighs, someone snorts, someone's hand flops onto your shoulder like a misplaced log. All of it feels like part of a rhythm now, not interruptions but harmonies. You're no longer awake with the noises. You're part of them. The second sleep gathers you in with the others, weaving you into the communal drift. Time doesn't matter anymore. You know there are only a few hours left before the rooster screams, before the bell tolls, before the frost demands your fingers for the day's chores. But instead of stealing from your rest, that knowledge makes it sweeter. You savor the limited hours, the way you'd savor bread still warm from the oven. Scarcity makes it rich, and when the dreams come, they come whole. Not the shallow, restless scraps of the first sleep, where you replay chores and invent arguments you'll never win. These dreams sink deep, layered, and strange. You walk through forests where the trees know your name. You hold conversations with rivers. You eat bread that never burns, never hardens, never runs out. None of it makes sense, but all of it feels true in the moment. Second sleep doesn't waste time with plausibility. It goes straight to the marrow of what you want. Sometimes, when you wake in the morning, you almost mourn it, not because you're still tired, though you usually are, but because you know the second sleep won't return until tomorrow night. It only exists here, in the fragile hours after wakefulness and before dawn. It's a gift you can't force, only receive. You shift again, burying your face in the blanket, inhaling the smell of wool, smoke, and human. The heaviness pulls you further down, layer by layer, until you're not even sure if you're breathing or just part of the night itself. The rooster is far away. The goat is far away. Even you are far away. And that's the sweetness of it. Not the straw, not the warmth, not even the silence, but the letting go. You realize it slowly. The way you realize you've been humming the same song under your breath for hours without noticing. At first, you thought the waking was a flaw, a mistake in the pattern of the night, a hole in the fabric. something you should fix by sheer willpower, praying harder, eating stranger herbs, stuffing wool in your ears until sleep stayed put. But it never stayed. It never listened. And now you see why. It wasn't a mistake. It was the rhythm. The rhythm of things is not the one the priests preach, all straight lines and commandments. It isn't the one the steward loves either, full of tallies and neat rows in his ledger. This rhythm is crooked. It bends, it breaks, it pauses and returns like breath. First sleep, second sleep, inhale, exhale, a whole night split in two, with a silence stretched in the middle, wide enough to live inside. You see it everywhere now. The baker's dough rises twice, punched down before it's ready to bloom again. The blacksmith heats the iron, hammers, and then lets it cool before striking again. Even the cow chews twice, slow and stubborn, refusing to accept that one pass is enough. Everything around you is doubled, halved, doubled again. Why would sleep be any different? You sit in the middle of the night with your knees tucked under your chin, staring at the embers and listening to the village breathe. Not snore, not mutter, breathe. A steady inhale, a steady exhale, spilling from the cottages around you. Dogs sigh, infants whimper, old men grunt as they roll over in their beds. You realize the whole place is moving in time together, a song that no one composed but everyone knows. The waking hour is not disorder. It's the pause in the song, the beat between the notes. You remember thinking once that it meant you were broken, that your body was clumsy, unable to do what it was supposed to. You thought of the rooster, smug and punctual, greeting each morning in one neat crow. Why couldn't you be like that? Why couldn't you rest in one piece, whole and uninterrupted? But now you know better. Even the rooster falters sometimes, crowing too early, too late, or in the middle of the night just to hear his own voice. The rhythm bends for everyone. Your uncle once said, "We're not cows." You thought it nonsense, but he was right, in his uncle way. Cows chew, cows sleep. Cows exist in long, steady lines. You are not a cow. You are a person. You wake, you wonder, you drift, you break and mend and break again. You belong to a rhythm that is less like a plow furrow and more like a dance, messy and uneven but still recognizable. You wonder if the king knows this rhythm, with his feather beds and golden pots. You wonder if queens wake in the dark and whisper to themselves, if princes sit by their fires in the silence and chew bread because they can't return to dreams, or if luxury teaches you to forget. Maybe the rhythm is loudest here, in the cottages where you can't ignore the cold or the hunger or the fact that one bed must hold 5 bodies. Maybe this is where the song is clearest, sung not in choirs but in coughs and creaks. The thought makes you smile in the dark, not the wide smile of daylight, all teeth and bravado, but the softer one you don't admit you have. You smile because you belong to this rhythm, because it explains you, because it explains everyone. You think of the times you've heard it called laziness, a waste, a failure to stay asleep like decent folk. But what if it's not failure at all? What if it's wisdom? The wisdom of knowing that the night is too long to face in one stretch, that silence needs to be shared out, that the mind needs space to wander before it rests again. The wisdom of listening to the body instead of scolding it. You shift under the blanket, straw poking your skin in places you'll scratch tomorrow. Around you, the others sleep. Their breaths rise and fall like waves, some crashing, some lapping gently. You add your own to the tide, steady and quiet. The embers glow faintly, reminding you of a heart beating. Not yours, not the village's, the night's. The rhythm holds you. It doesn't demand you stay awake, and it doesn't demand you sleep. It lets you float between, knowing you'll come back when you're ready. You no longer curse it. You lean into it, the way you lean into the sway of a cart instead of fighting it. It's not broken, this life. It never was. It's just tuned differently. A slower song, an older song, a song that doesn't mind if you miss a note now and then. You close your eyes again. Inhale, exhale, wake, sleep, always the same rhythm. You never really stop sleeping. Not entirely. You stumble through mornings with one foot still in the dream you left behind. A dream about turnips that argued with you in Latin, or about your cousins suddenly sprouting wings and flying straight into the thatch. You rub your eyes, but the haze doesn't clear. Instead, it lingers, weaving itself into the bread you need, the water you fetch, the wood you split. You're awake enough to work, but not awake enough to stop yawning. The world accepts this version of you anyway. Everyone's the same. The rooster crows, and you swear it's the same sound he made hours ago when he got confused in the middle of the night. The bell rings, not because anyone's truly ready for it, but because time doesn't wait for second sleep to finish its work. You shuffle into your chores with heavy limbs, pretending you've crossed into the realm of day. But really, you're still wandering between. It's less a crossing than a smudge. The line between night and morning blurred by the fact that you never fully left either behind. Your body knows this. It stumbles, aches, groans, and yet keeps moving, like an ox, refusing to collapse even though its legs tremble. You catch yourself nodding while hauling water, the bucket tilting dangerously. You blink awake to realize you've been praying half asleep, your lips forming words you don't remember choosing. And maybe that's the trick. Prayers mumbled in that half-dreaming state might be the ones God listens to most. He probably prefers them raw, unpolished, without all the performance. You beg for mercy and bread and fewer fleas, all while snoring lightly. Sacred multitasking. You watch others too, because it's easier to forgive yourself when you see everyone else carrying the same glassy-eyed days. The steward fumbles his tallies, counts the same sheep twice, mutters curses at his own hand. The baker forgets the salt, blames the fire, then yawns into the dough until it looks like he tried to kiss it. Even the priest blinks through his sermon, voice slurring at the edges, eyelids drooping between verses. Holiness has never looked so drowsy. It's clear now that no one here ever truly wakes, not fully. The whole village exists in fragments, caught halfway between dream and duty. You see it in their faces, the faraway gaze while mending nets, the pauses in conversation when someone forgets what word comes next, the soft snores disguised as thoughtful silence. You begin to suspect this is what life is meant to be. Not sharp edges, not clear breaks, but a long muddle of waking and sleeping layered together. Even the animals join the blur. The goat dozes while chewing. The dog snores with one ear perked. The cow looks half asleep at all times, though perhaps that's just the nature of cows. You envy them. They live permanently in the between, never ashamed of it. You try to imitate them, but the moment you let yourself drift, your cousin throws a clod of dirt at your head and calls you lazy. So you shuffle on, half awake, half dreaming, muttering about cows and justice. Sometimes you wonder if this is why people tell so many stories of visions and omens. When you're never fully awake, everything looks touched by the other side. The glint of frost becomes a warning. A bird call becomes a message. A shadow becomes an ancestor glaring at you for stealing extra bread. Your own dreams leak into the day, and no one questions it because everyone else's dreams leak too. The whole village is haunted, but gently, like a lullaby that never ends. You catch yourself drifting while the priest drones on about sin. Your head dips, your breath slows, and for a moment you're convinced you're back in the straw bed, warm and safe. Then someone nudges you, and you jerk upright, eyes wide, pretending you were praying. But even then, you know you're not truly awake. You've just shifted your dream to fit the day. The rhythm doesn't stop at dawn. First sleep, second sleep, then the slow drifting through the daylight hours, naps stolen against walls, prayers mumbled with heads bowed too long. It's all one continuous loop, a river that never breaks but sometimes runs faster, sometimes slower. You realize you don't so much live in days as in layers of half sleep. You dream with your eyes open. You work while nodding. You wake without leaving sleep behind, and maybe that's why the world feels bearable. If you were forced to stay sharp from dawn to dusk, to live entirely in one realm, you'd break. The weight of hunger, of cold, of endless chores would crush you. But softened by sleep, blurred at the edges, it becomes survivable. You're never entirely present for your own suffering, which is a kind of grace. The rooster crows again, and you ignore him. The bell rings, and you keep yawning. The bread rises in the oven, and the baker finally admits he forgot the yeast. Life keeps moving, whether or not you're fully awake to witness it. And you, bleary-eyed, blinking against the light, drifting between one sleep and the next, begin again. Always between, always both. You never really stop sleeping or waking.